The Last Autumn of Lothlorien. Chapter 1. Fading Light. Golden leaves drifted lazily through the air, catching the dappled sunlight as they spiraled toward the forest floor. Celebrían stood motionless beneath the great Mallorn trees of Kara's Galadriel, her silver hair gleaming in the fading afternoon light. Though her face remained serene, her eyes betrayed a deep melancholy as she observed the falling leaves, a sight that had once filled her with joy but now served as a reminder of what was ending. This autumn was different from those that had come before. Any elf with the slightest sensitivity could feel it, the gradual diminishing of power that had protected these woods for millennia. The magic of Lothlorien, sustained for so long by her mother's ring Nenya, was slowly withdrawing like the tide before a storm. "My lady," the voice broke through her contemplation. She turned to find Thalion, captain of her personal guard, standing a respectful distance away. Young by Elven standards, he had proven himself an exceptional warrior during the war against Sauron, earning a place of honor among the Galadrim despite his relative youth. "Forgive the interruption," he continued with a slight bow, "but the border patrol has returned. They bring unusual tidings." Celebrían noted the hesitation in his voice. "What manner of tidings, Thalion?" "A stranger was found at the northern borders, unconscious and gravely wounded. Not an elf, yet not entirely of the race of men either. Haldir believed the matter required your attention, especially given—" He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Given my mother's departure," Celebrían finished for him. Since Galadriel had sailed west with the other ring-bearers, the governance of Lothlorien had fallen to Celebrían, at least until she too would eventually join her husband Elrond in Valinor. "Yes, my lady. Haldir would not have disturbed you otherwise." "Where have they taken this stranger?" "To the healing pavilion. The healers attend to his wounds, but they are perplexed by his nature." Curiosity stirred within Celebrían, temporarily displacing her melancholy. In these fading days of the elves in Middle-earth, few mysteries remain to capture their interest. "Lead the way, Thalion. I would see this curious visitor for myself." They ascended the winding stairs carved into the massive Mallorn trees, passing flets where elves went about their daily tasks with outward serenity that belied the underlying tension. Everyone felt it, the coming change, the inevitable departure. Some had already begun preparations for the journey to the Grey Havens, packing away millennia of memories into modest traveling chests. The healing pavilion occupied several connected flets high among the branches, its open design allowing fresh air and dappled light to aid in recovery. When Celebrían entered, several healers bowed respectfully before returning to their work. Haldir, the marchwarden who had patrolled Lothlorien's borders for countless years, stood near a screened alcove, his expression troubled. "My lady," he greeted her with a formal salute. "Thank you for coming. Tell me of this stranger Haldir," Celebrían requested, moving toward the alcove. "How came he to our borders?" "We found him near the Nimrodal, gravely wounded with signs of orc weapons. Yet there were no orc tracks to be found, and his path seemed to lead from the direction of Dol Guldur." Haldir's voice lowered. "His wounds should have been fatal, my lady. No mortal man could have survived them long enough to reach our borders." Celebrían frowned. Since Sauron's defeat, Dol Guldur had stood abandoned, its evil presence diminished but not entirely eliminated. Strange whispers occasionally reached them of shadows gathering once more in that accursed fortress, though none had given them much credence. "And you say he is not fully of the race of men. See for yourself, my lady." Haldir drew back the gossamer screen, revealing a figure lying motionless on a bed of soft leaves. He appeared young, perhaps in his third decade by human reckoning, with features too fine and hair too dark for the Rohirrim or other men of the north. His skin held a subtle luminescence, noticeable only to elven eyes, and his ears, while not pointed like an elf's, had a slight upward tilt at their tips. Most striking, however, were the wounds visible where the healers had cut away his tattered clothing. Black veins spread outward from several deep gashes across his torso and right arm, the flesh around them gray and necrotic. Yet at the edges of each wound, a faint silver light seemed to push back against the corruption containing it. "Morgul poison," Celebrían whispered, recognizing the signature of evil weapons crafted in ancient darkness. "But how? The Nazgul are destroyed, their weapons rendered powerless." "Not all such blades were wielded by the Nine," Haldir replied grimly. "Some remained in hidden armories, awaiting new masters." Celebrían moved closer, studying the stranger's face. Despite his grievous wounds, his expression seemed peaceful, as if dreaming of pleasant things. "What have the healers discovered?" "Little enough, my lady. His blood flows more slowly than a man's, yet quicker than an elf's. The poison that should have consumed him entirely seems held at bay by something within him, some power or lineage we cannot identify." "Has he spoken?" she asked, noting the slight movement beneath his closed eyelids. "Only delirious fragments. A name, Amroth, was mentioned several times along with warnings about the awakening. Nothing coherent." Celebrían's gaze sharpened at the mention of Amroth, the former lord of Lothlorien who had been lost centuries ago, driven to despair when his beloved Nimrodel disappeared. "Amroth, you are certain?" "Yes, my lady." Most insistent he was, even in his delirium. A soft moan from the stranger interrupted their conversation. His eyes flickered open, eyes of such a deep amber color that they appeared almost golden in the dappled light. For a moment they remained unfocused, staring at nothing. Then they fixed with startling intensity on Celebrían's face. "Silver Queen," he whispered in a voice rough with pain, speaking Sindarin with an unusual accent. "The shadows return to Dol Guldur. The sleeper stirs beneath the fortress. You must." His voice faltered as pain overtook him again, his back arching slightly as the black veins across his chest pulsed with malevolence. "Be still," Celebrían commanded gently, placing her hand on his forehead. "Save your strength. You are safe now, within the protection of Lothlorien." A bitter smile crossed his face. "No," he whispered, "none are safe now, the power fades. The Guardian departed. The autumn comes." His eyes rolled back as consciousness fled once more. Celebrían withdrew her hand, troubled by both his words and what she had sensed in that brief contact. There was something familiar about him, like a half-remembered song from her childhood, yet strange as well, a melody played in an unfamiliar key. "Post a guard," she instructed Haldir. "When he wakes again, I wish to be informed immediately." "Do you believe his warnings hold truth, my lady?" Haldir asked, his normally stoic expression revealing a hint of concern. Celebrían considered carefully before answering. "I believe he believes them. Whether shadows truly return to Dol Guldur remains to be seen. Since my mother's departure, our awareness of events beyond our borders has diminished. Shall I increase the border patrols? Perhaps send scouts toward Dol Guldur, not toward the fortress itself," Celebrían decided. "That evil place has claimed too many lives already. But yes, strengthen our eastern watches. If something stirs there again, I would know of it before it reaches our threshold." As they exited the healing pavilion, Thalion fell into step beside her. "There is one other matter, my lady," he said quietly. "Ithelwyn has returned." Celebrían stopped abruptly, surprise momentarily overcoming her composure. "Ithelwyn, after all this time. She arrived during the changing of the watch, coming from the west rather than from her hermitage in the mountains. She asks for audience with you, most urgently." This news was perhaps even more unexpected than the mysterious stranger. Ithelwyn, once counted among the wisest of Galadriel's handmaidens, had abandoned Kara's Galadriel nearly 500 years ago, retreating to solitude in the mountains after claiming to have received visions too terrible to ignore yet too obscure to interpret. Some called her mad, others more charitably named her a seer whose gift had overwhelmed her reason. "Where is she now?" Celebrían asked. "In the Garden of Remembrance, my lady. She refused all offers of refreshment or rest until she had spoken with you." Celebrían nodded thoughtfully. "Very well, I will go to her, but first—" She turned back toward the healing pavilion. "Find our oldest records of Amroth and Nimrodel, and anything we possess regarding the foundations of Dol Guldur, what existed there before the fortress was razed." "As you wish, my lady," Thalion replied with a slight bow. As Celebrían made her way toward the Garden of Remembrance, her mind turned over the strange convergence of events. A mysterious half-elven stranger bearing warnings of darkness returning to Dol Guldur, the unexpected reappearance of Ethelwyn after centuries of self-imposed exile, and through it all, the steady decline of Lothlorien's power as autumn deepened around them. The Garden of Remembrance occupied a secluded hollow at the center of Kara's Galadriel, where statues and monuments honored elvish heroes and moments of significance. At its heart stood a reflecting pool fed by a small tributary of the Nimrodel, its waters said to sometimes reveal glimpses of distant places or times to those with the gift to perceive them. Beside this pool stood a slender figure in a travel-stained gray cloak, her back to Celebrían as she gazed into the water's depths. Though centuries had passed since they last met, Ethelwyn was unmistakable. Her posture, the distinctive silver streak in her otherwise raven-black hair, the slight tilt of her head as she contemplated something only she could see. "Ethelwyn," Celebrían called softly, "it has been long since you walked among us." The figure turned slowly, revealing a face that remained youthful in the elven way, yet marked by a profound weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. Ethelwyn's eyes, once a vibrant blue, had faded to a pale, almost colorless gray, as if the visions they had witnessed had gradually leached away their hue. "Lady Celebrían," Ethelwyn replied, her voice surprisingly strong despite her frail appearance. "Daughter of the Lady of Light, the burden of Lothlorien falls to you now, in these final days." There was something disconcerting in the way she spoke, a certainty that sent a chill through Celebrían despite the warmth of the afternoon. "What brings you back to us, old friend? Your hermitage in the mountains is abandoned, as all dwellings in Middle-earth soon shall be," Ethelwyn interrupted. "The visions have become clearer, more insistent. I could no longer ignore their summons." She gestured toward the reflecting pool. "Look, tell me what you see." Celebrían stepped forward, gazing into the still water. For several moments, she saw only the reflected canopy of Mallorn trees and patches of azure sky beyond. Then, gradually, the reflection rippled without any wind to disturb it. The water darkened, and within its depths, shadowy forms began to take shape. A fortress stood upon a hill of naked stone, its towers reaching upward like gnarled fingers. Around it, the land lay blighted and barren. Within its walls, lights flickered, not the warm glow of hearth fires, but an unnatural illumination that pulsed with sickly rhythm, like the heartbeat of some malevolent organism. "Dol Guldur," Celebrían whispered, recognizing the silhouette of the dreaded fortress. "Yes," Ethelwyn confirmed, "but look deeper, see what stirs beneath." The vision shifted, plunging downward through layers of rock and ancient foundations, into subterranean chambers never meant to be discovered. There, in darkness that seemed almost solid, something moved, a vast presence, formless yet somehow aware, stirring after eons of slumber. Celebrían gasped and stepped back from the pool, the water instantly returning to its normal appearance. "What manner of evil is this?" Not Sauron returned. His power was broken with the destruction of the One Ring. Older than Sauron, Ethelwyn said, her colorless eyes fixed on Celebrian's face. Before the Dark Lord claimed Dol Guldur as his fortress, before even the first stones were laid by men or elves, something slumbered in that hill, something that predates our coming to Middle-earth. Why show itself now, after all these ages? Ethelwyn's expression grew even more grave. Because the power that kept it dormant wanes. The three rings depart with their bearers. The magic that preserved and protected now withdraws from Middle-earth. As autumn comes to Lothlorien, so too does it fall upon all elven works and influences. And what would you have me do with this knowledge? Celebrían asked, though a sense of foreboding told her she already knew the answer. The sleeper must not fully awaken, Ethelwyn replied, her voice taking on an almost musical cadence, as if reciting words taught to her by another. The autumn may come, but winter can yet be delayed. A choice approaches, Silver Queen, to depart and leave Middle-earth to its fate, or to make one final stand in defense of a world your people are leaving behind. Before Celebrían could respond, a commotion from the direction of the healing pavilion drew their attention. Thalion appeared at the garden's entrance, his expression urgent. "My lady," he called, "the stranger is awake and most insistent on speaking with you. He claims to have a message from Amroth himself." Ethelwyn's pale eyes widened slightly. "So it begins," she murmured. "The past and future converge. The last pieces move into position." Celebrían looked between her captain and the enigmatic seer, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more heavily upon her shoulders. Her mother had departed believing the greatest threats to Middle-earth vanquished with Sauron's fall. Yet now it seemed new dangers, or perhaps very old ones, stirred once more. "Come," she said to Ethelwyn, "let us hear what this messenger has to say. Perhaps between his warnings and your visions, we might discern the true shape of the threat that faces us." As they walked toward the healing pavilion, the golden leaves continued to fall around them, drifting downward in ever-increasing numbers. The last autumn of Lothlorien deepened, and with it, the sense that time for the elves in Middle-earth grew short. Yet in Celebrían's heart, a resolve began to form. If darkness threatened once more, she would not simply abandon these shores without a final effort to protect what her people had loved for so many ages. Her mother had stood against the shadow until the end of her time in Middle-earth. She could do no less. High above, a cold wind stirred the uppermost branches of the Mallorn trees, sending a fresh cascade of golden leaves spinning downward. Among them, nearly indistinguishable from the natural fall, a single leaf drifted with purpose, its movements too deliberate to be the work of mere wind. It spiraled toward the healing pavilion, came to rest beside the window nearest the mysterious stranger, and then, unseen by any save perhaps Ethelwyn's knowing eyes, it transformed. From golden leaf to tiny, winged figure, its gossamer wings catching the light as it slipped silently through the window. Chapter 2, Whispers from the Past. The healing pavilion hummed with tension as Celebrían and Ethelwyn entered. The stranger sat upright on his bed, his posture rigid despite his injuries. The black veins across his chest had receded somewhat, though the flesh around his wounds remained unnaturally gray. His amber eyes fixed immediately on Celebrían, widening slightly when they shifted to Ethelwyn. "You've brought the seer," he said, his voice stronger than before. "Good, time grows short." "You know of me?" Ethelwyn asked, her colorless eyes studying him intently. "I know of what you are," he replied cryptically. "Those who see beyond the veil of the present moment have become rare in these latter days. We need your gift, now more than ever." Celebrían stepped forward. "You spoke of Amroth when you first awakened. He was lost centuries ago, driven to despair by the disappearance of his beloved Nimrodel." A sad smile crossed the stranger's face. "Not lost, not entirely. He attempted to rise but winced as pain lanced through him. With a gesture, he invited them closer instead. "My name is Urundil. I am the last guardian of Amroth's trust, the final keeper of a vow made long before your birth, Lady Celebrían." "What manner of being are you?" Thalion asked from his position near the door, his hand resting cautiously on his dagger. "You are neither fully elven nor of the race of men." "Perceptive," Urundil acknowledged. "I am of mixed lineage, descended from both the Eldar and the Númenóreans. My ancestors served in Amroth's court, and when he departed with Nimrodel, seeking the havens, one remained behind to keep watch." "Watch over what?" Celebrían asked. Urundil's expression grew grave. "Over what slumbers beneath Dol Guldur." He lowered his voice. "In the First Age, when the world was young and Morgoth still walked these lands, powers and presences dwelt in Middle-earth that have since been forgotten. Some were subdued by the valor. Others, too deeply rooted in the fabric of Arda, could only be bound and put to sleep." "The sleeper you warned of," Celebrían murmured. "Yes, the elves called it Morlamin the Black Echo. It dwelt beneath the hill long before Dol Guldur was raised, slumbering in the deep places. Sauron built his fortress there not by chance, but because he sensed the ancient power beneath the earth and sought to harness it for his own purposes." Ethelwyn leaned forward, her pale eyes intense. "My visions showed something stirring in darkness, a presence both formless yet defined. The Black Echo stirs because the power that kept it dormant weakens," Urundil confirmed. "For ages, it was bound by enchantments maintained by the Three Rings. Now that the rings have departed Middle-earth, the bindings fail," Celebrían finished, understanding dawning. But why would Amroth concern himself with this ancient evil? His realm was Lothlorien, not the hill that would become Dol Guldur. Urundil's gaze turned inward, as if seeing across the vast gulf of years. "Few now remember, but before Lothlorien was established, before the Mallorn trees were planted, and the realm of the Galadriel came into being, Amroth's people dwelt in forests that extended to the very foot of that hill. They felt the sleeper's dreams, dark whispers that troubled even elven minds. Working with the greatest loremasters among his people, Amroth discovered how to strengthen the ancient bindings, keeping the Black Echo dormant." "And what happened when he was lost at sea?" Thalion asked. "The knowledge passed to my ancestors, who maintained the vigil. From generation to generation, we renewed the lesser enchantments that supported the greater bindings of the Three Rings. But now," he gestured helplessly, "my powers alone cannot maintain what the rings themselves can no longer sustain. The Black Echo wakens." "What exactly is this Black Echo?" Celebrían pressed. "You speak of it as a presence, yet also as something formless." Urundil hesitated, clearly struggling to articulate concepts that defied easy explanation. "Imagine a thought that has existed since the music of the Ainur, a discordant note that took root in the physical world. Not a being as you would understand it, but a consciousness that extends through stone and earth, that dreams in darkness and whispers to those who dwell above." "What does it want?" Thalion's practical mind sought concrete threats to defend against. "To reshape the world according to its dreams," Urundil replied grimly. "The Black Echo remembers Arda as it might have been had Morgoth's influence in the music gone unchallenged. It seeks to unmake what is and recreate what could have been." A chill silence fell over the pavilion as they contemplated this threat. Not an army to be fought or a fortress to be besieged, but something far more abstract and potentially more devastating. "I've brought the records you requested, my lady," a soft voice interrupted. An elven archivist stood in the doorway, her arms laden with ancient scrolls and bound volumes. She placed them carefully on a table near the entrance and departed with a bow. "The histories of Amroth and the founding of Lothlorien," Celebrían explained, moving toward the documents. Perhaps they contain some reference to this black echo and how it might be contained. As she began examining the oldest scrolls, Ethelwyn approached Eärendil, studying him with her unsettling pale gaze. "You bear a wound that should have claimed your life," she observed. "Yet something within you resists the darkness. What power sustains you?" Eärendil smiled faintly. "The same power that has maintained the vigil for centuries." Amroth was more foresighted than many gave him credit for. "Before departing with Nimrodel, he entrusted my ancestor with an artifact, a small portion of his own Fea, his spirit, preserved in crystalline form. A soul shard," Ethelwyn breathed, astonishment evident in her normally impassive features. "Such things are spoken of only in the oldest tales, from the days when elven magic still flowed freely through Middle-earth. It has passed from guardian to guardian, sustaining us beyond normal mortal spans and granting us a measure of resistance against the darkness." From beneath his tunic, Eärendil withdrew a small crystal suspended on a silver chain. Within the crystal, a faint light pulsed like a heartbeat. "This is all that remains of Amroth in Middle-earth, a fragment of his essence, preserved to maintain the vigil when he himself could not. And it is failing," Ethelwyn observed, noting how the light flickered erratically like a candle in a strong draught. "As am I," Eärendil admitted. "The attack that brought me to your borders was no random encounter with orcs. Servants of the Black Echo, drawn by its stirring, sought to eliminate the last guardian before I could bring warning." Celebrían looked up from the ancient texts she was examining. "These records mention a ritual performed by Amroth and his loremasters at the founding of Lothlorien. They speak of binding the Earth Dreamer and silencing the echo of unmaking." She frowned. "But the details are frustratingly vague." "The full account would be in the Annals of Amroth," Eärendil said. "A book bound in silver bark, written in his own hand." Thalion shook his head. "No such text exists in our archives. If it ever did, it has been lost to time." "Not lost," Eärendil corrected. "Hidden. Amroth concealed his most important writings in a place only his successors would know to look. He attempted to stand again, this time succeeding despite evident pain." "I must show you, there is little time." "You are in no condition to travel," Celebrían protested. Eärendil's amber eyes fixed on hers with surprising intensity. "Lady Celebrían, the Black Echo grows stronger with each passing day. Already its whispers reach the creatures of the forest, turning them against one another. Soon it will extend its influence to the minds of elves and men. If we do not act now, there may be no opportunity to act at all." Ethelwyn nodded slowly. "He speaks truth. My visions show darkness spreading outward from Dol Guldur, seeping into the land like poison into a wound. What begins as whispers will become commands, and what minds can resist will be overwhelmed by those that cannot." After a moment's consideration, Celebrían turned to Thalion. "Prepare an escort. Light armor, swift horses. We travel within the hour." "Where are we going?" the captain asked. Celebrían looked to Eärendil, who answered with quiet certainty. "To the heart of Lothlorien, where it all began, the hill of Seren Amroth." The journey to Seren Amroth took less time than expected, despite Eärendil's weakened condition. The small company, Celebrían, Eärendil, Ethelwyn, Thalion, and a guard of 6 Galadrim warriors, rode in silence through forests that seemed unnaturally still. Few birds sang, and the usual rustling of small creatures in the underbrush was notably absent. "The forest listens," Ethelwyn murmured as they passed beneath ancient trees whose leaves had already begun to turn golden. "It senses the change coming." Seren Amroth rose before them as the afternoon light began to fade. A green hill crowned with a double ring of trees. White-flowered Nifredil bloomed among the grass despite the advancing autumn, their delicate blossoms stirring in a breeze that touched nothing else. As they ascended the hill, Erendil's strength seemed to return somewhat. He walked more steadily, and the black veins visible at his collar receded further. "The power of Amroth still lingers here," he explained, sensing their unasked questions. This was the heart of his realm, where his presence was strongest. At the summit, within the inner ring of white trees, he knelt before the largest Mallorn, a towering giant that must have been among the first planted in Lothlorien. Placing his palm against its silver-gray bark, he spoke words in a dialect of Sindarin so ancient that even Celebrían struggled to follow it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft sound like a sigh, a section of the trunk shimmered and seemed to fold inward, revealing a small hollow within the living wood. From this space, Erendil carefully extracted a slender volume bound in what appeared to be silver bark, its cover inscribed with intricate patterns that shifted subtly in the fading light. "The Annals of Amroth," he said reverently, handling the book as one might a precious and fragile treasure, not seen by any eyes save those of the Guardians since he departed these shores. They gathered around as Erendil carefully opened the book, revealing pages of some material that resembled neither paper nor parchment, covered in flowing script that seemed to move slightly, as if the ink had not fully dried despite the passage of centuries. "Here," he said, finding a particular page, "the account of the binding ritual." Celebrían leaned closer, translating the ancient text aloud for the benefit of the others. "When first we felt the dreamer stirring beneath the eastern hill, we knew we had discovered what the Noldor had warned of, one of the earth-bound thoughts, fragments of Morgoth's discord that had taken root in the physical world. Unlike the Balrogs of fire or the dragons of devastation, these were subtle powers, working through whisper and influence rather than flame and claw." She continued reading. "Through consultation with the wisest among the Noldor and experimentation with the natural magic of the forest, we devised a means to bind the Black Echo, forcing it back into dormancy. 3 elements were required. First, a circle of power drawn from the living earth itself. Second, a focus for that power, crafted from materials resistant to corruption. And third, a portion of Fe willingly given by those of sufficient spiritual strength to maintain the binding." "Those of sufficient spiritual strength," Thalion repeated thoughtfully. "The 3 ring-bearers." "Precisely," Erendil confirmed. "Though they didn't know it at the time, Amroth and his loremasters created a binding that would later be maintained by the power of the 3 rings. Nenya, wielded by Lady Galadriel, was particularly important due to its proximity. And now all 3 have departed Middle-earth," Celebrían said grimly. "The binding fails." "Can it be restored?" Thalion asked, always focused on practical solutions. "Recreated, using the method described here." Erendil's expression was solemn. "That would require power equivalent to what the 3 rings provided. In this diminishing age, where can such power be found?" A heavy silence fell over the group as they contemplated this seemingly insurmountable obstacle. The light continued to fade around them, the first stars appearing in the eastern sky. "Perhaps," Ethelwyn said softly, breaking the silence, "the question is not where such power can be found, but how the power that remains can be focused more effectively." All eyes turned to the seer, whose pale gaze seemed fixed on something beyond their perception. "The 3 rings have departed, yes, but their influence lingers in Middle-earth, particularly in places where they dwelt longest. Lothlorien, Rivendell, the Grey Havens, echoes of echoes, diminishing but not yet gone." "You suggest we could gather these remnants somehow?" Celebrían asked, intrigued despite her skepticism. "Not gather," Ethelwyn corrected. "Channel, direct." The 3 worked in harmony, each amplifying the others across vast distances. Perhaps a similar principle could be applied to their lingering influences. Erendil was nodding slowly, excitement building in his amber eyes. Yes, yes, that might work. The resonance pattern described in Amroth's ritual, with modifications. He flipped through several pages of the book, his fingers tracing diagrams that resembled complex musical notations more than conventional magical symbols. There is another factor to consider, he continued, looking up from the text. The black echo is stirring, yes, but it is not yet fully awake. We need not match the original binding's full strength, only create a new pattern strong enough to reinforce what remains of the old one. Like rebuilding the foundations of a structure before the walls collapse entirely, Thalion suggested, beginning to understand. Exactly, Urindil confirmed. And for that we would need. He fell silent, his expression troubled. Need what? Celebrían prompted. 3 new anchors, he finally said. 3 individuals of significant spiritual strength who could serve as living focuses for the remnant energies of the rings. They need not be as powerful as the original ring-bearers, but they must have some connection to the 3. Celebrían's breath caught as she realized the implication. You mean me, she said softly. As daughter of Galadriel, bearer of Nenya. Urindil nodded. You would be one, yes. For Vilya, we would need someone connected to Lord Elrond. His sons remain in Middle-earth, Thalion offered. Lords Eladin and Elrohir often ride with the Dunedain in the north. And for Narya, Celebrían asked. The Red Ring was borne by Mithrandir, who has returned to the west. Before Mithrandir, Narya was held by Círdan the shipwright, Urindil reminded her. Though he too may be preparing to depart, his connection to the ring endured for an age. His essence is deeply entwined with its power. The implications of what they were discussing settled over the group. Coordinating such an effort would require swift communication across vast distances, convincing disparate parties of the threat, and developing a ritual based on ancient principles that none of them fully understood, all before the Black Echo fully awakened. There is one more component needed, Urindil added, his hand moving unconsciously to the crystal containing Amroth's soul shard. A final focus to direct and harmonize the 3 anchors, something or someone, with a direct connection to the original binding. His meaning was clear, though none wished to acknowledge it aloud. The soul shard that had sustained generations of guardians would be consumed in the ritual, and with it, likely the last of Urindil's unnatural lifespan. As if sensing their thoughts, he smiled gently. My ancestors have maintained this vigil for centuries, knowing this day would come. I am prepared for what must be done. Celebrían studied him with newfound respect. You came to warn us, knowing it might mean your end. I came to ensure the Black Echo remains bound, he corrected. My life is a small price for the safety of Middle-earth. Before the conversation could continue, one of the Galadrim guards approached, his expression troubled. My lady, he said with a bow to Celebrían, something stirs in the forest below. The trees whisper warnings. They moved to the edge of the hill's summit, looking out over the darkening forest. At first, nothing seemed amiss. Then, gradually, they became aware of movement among the trees, subtle shifts in shadow that suggested creatures moving with purpose, rather than the random wanderings of forest animals. Wolves, Thalion said, his keen eyesight identifying the shapes. But they move strangely, almost in formation. The Black Echo extends its influence, Urindil said grimly. It begins with creatures of little will, bending them to its purpose. Soon it will reach for stronger minds. They're surrounding the hill, one of the guards reported, scanning the perimeter. Cutting off our retreat to Kara's Galadhin. Celebrían's decision was swift. We make camp here for the night. Círdan Amroth still holds power that may discourage them from ascending. At dawn, we'll determine whether to fight our way back or proceed directly to the next phase of our plan. As the guards established a perimeter and prepared what defenses they could, Celebrían turned back to Urindil and Ithilwyn. We have until morning to devise a strategy for what comes next. If we are to attempt this ritual, we must move quickly." Urindil nodded, the annals of Amroth still clutched in his hands. "I will study the text further, see what modifications might be made to accommodate our limitations. And I will seek clearer visions," Ethelwyn added, her colorless eyes already taking on the distant look that preceded her mystical insights. "Perhaps the valor will grant me one final glimpse of the path forward, before my sight fades entirely from Middle-earth." As night fell fully over Lothlorien, the small company huddled on the summit of Seren Amroth, surrounded by woods that had once been the safest realm in Middle-earth, but now harbored growing shadows. Below, the eyes of controlled wolves gleamed in darkness, their unnatural stillness more terrifying than any aggression would have been. Celebrían stood at the edge of the white tree circle, gazing eastward toward the distant silhouette of Dol Guldur, barely visible against the night sky. There, beneath ancient stones, something dreamed of unmaking the world, and here, on a hill that symbolized all that was most beautiful about the elven realms of Middle-earth, a desperate plan took shape to prevent that nightmare from becoming reality. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent to the struggles below. Yet among them, the star of Eärendil seemed to shine with particular brightness this night, as if the mariner who bore the last Silmaril across the sky somehow sensed that his granddaughter stood at a crossroads of fate, preparing to make a stand against darkness in a time when many believed such battles were already consigned to history. Chapter 3: Threads of Power. Dawn broke reluctantly over Seren Amroth, pale light filtering through a mist that had settled during the night. Celebrían stood beside one of the white trees, watching as the shadows below slowly took form. The wolf pack still encircling the hill, their numbers increased since nightfall. Their behavior remained disturbing in its precision. They maintained perfect spacing, moving in shifts so that the perimeter was never weakened, displaying an intelligence that no natural wolves should possess. "At least 50 now," Thalion reported, joining her at the edge of the summit. "And something else moves among them, larger shadows that stay just within the tree line." "The echo gathers more servants," Celebrían murmured. "How quickly its influence spreads." "My lady," Thalion said, his voice dropping to ensure privacy, "the guards grow uneasy. This hill holds significance to our people, but it offers little tactical advantage if we are besieged. We should attempt to break through while we still can." Before she could respond, Ethelwyn approached, her pale eyes luminous in the early light. The seer had spent the night in deep meditation, barely moving from her position near the great Mallorn tree. "Fighting our way back to Kara's Galadhin would be folly," she said without preamble. "The path there is now thick with the echo's servants, not just wolves but other creatures drawn from deeper parts of the forest. And worse, I sense confusion among our own people. The whispers have begun to reach elven minds." Alarm flashed across Celebrían's features. "So quickly, I had hoped we would have more time. The Galadrim have strong wills, and the remaining enchantments of Lothlorien still offer some protection," Ethelwyn assured her. "But those protections fade with each passing hour. The corruption sinks roots into the very soil of the realm." Urindil joined them, the annals of Amroth cradled carefully in his arms. Despite a night of study, he appeared stronger than the day before, as if proximity to Seren Amroth continued to revitalize him. "I have found what we need," he announced, his amber eyes bright with cautious hope. "The ritual can be adapted for our purposes. Instead of creating a new binding from nothing, we can use what remains of the original enchantment as a foundation, reinforcing it with fresh power channeled through the 3 anchors we discussed." "And how do we reach these anchors?" Thalion asked practically. "Rivendell lies many leagues to the north, and the Grey Havens farther still to the west. Even if we could break through the creatures surrounding us, The journey would take weeks we clearly do not have. Eärendil smiled faintly. Not necessarily. The annals describe a method of communication Amroth developed, a sending of thoughts across vast distances, carried by what he called the song lines of Middle-earth. The straight road that binds all elven realms. Ethelwyn nodded, understanding immediately. Even as it fades, it can still serve as a conduit for those with the skill to use it. Precisely, Eärendil confirmed. And Lady Celebrían, as daughter of Galadriel and wife of Elrond, has connections to both remaining anchors. With the proper focus, she could reach them without physical travel. All eyes turned to Celebrían, whose expression revealed both determination and doubt. I have never attempted such communication. My mother possessed such gifts, but they have not manifested strongly in me. They are there, Ethelwyn assured her. Perhaps dormant but present, and Seren Amroth will amplify them. This place was specifically chosen by Amroth for its unique resonance with the song lines. A moment of silence fell, as Celebrían considered the proposal. Around them, the mist began to lift, revealing the full extent of their predicament. The hill of Seren Amroth stood like an island in a growing sea of corruption. Even the renowned Melian trees at the base of the hill showed signs of distress, their golden leaves falling in unprecedented numbers. "What must I do?" Celebrían finally asked. Eärendil opened the annals to a page marked with a slender ribbon of silver material. The ritual requires 3 phases. First, establishing your connection as the Nenya anchor, which must be done here on Seren Amroth. Second, reaching across the song lines to connect with the other 2 anchors and bring them into alignment. Third, using those aligned connections to reinforce the binding on the Black Echo. "And the soul shard?" she asked quietly. "Your role in this?" His hand moved unconsciously to the crystal around his neck. "I will serve as the focus during the 3rd phase, directing the combined energies toward Dol Guldur and the binding patterns established by Amroth." The shard contains not just a fragment of his essence, but his knowledge of how the original enchantment was structured. "It will consume you," she stated rather than asked. "Most likely," he acknowledged without fear. "But that was always the fate of the final guardian. My lineage has prepared for this moment for generations." Celebrían turned to Thalion. "Organize our defenses. We need time, at least until nightfall, when the song lines shine most clearly." The captain nodded and moved to direct the guards, who had been maintaining a vigilant watch around the summit's perimeter. Celebrían then addressed Ethelwyn. "You said your visions showed confusion among our people. Can you sense anything more specific? Who might still be able to help us if we could reach them?" The seer closed her colorless eyes, concentrating. "Haldir and his brothers resist the whispers better than most. Their long experience as guardians of the borders has strengthened their minds against external influence. And there are others, scattered throughout Lothlorien, but they grow fewer as the hours pass. Then we must act quickly," Celebrían decided. "Eärendil, show me what preparations are needed for the 1st phase. If we are to have any chance of success, I must establish myself as the Nenya anchor before attempting to reach the others." The day passed in tense preparation. While Thalion and the guards maintained their vigilance against the growing forces surrounding the hill, Celebrían worked with Eärendil and Ethelwyn to prepare for the evening's ritual. They gathered Nifredil blossoms to form the necessary patterns on the ground, their white petals seeming to glow with inner light even in daylight. Eärendil carefully transcribed critical passages from the annals onto pieces of bark from the white trees, creating a circle of text that would help focus the energies they sought to channel. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, new developments increased their sense of urgency. Thalion reported seeing elven figures moving among the wolves below, Galadriel, who had succumbed to the echo's influence. their movements as eerily coordinated as those of the animals they now commanded. "They do not yet attempt to ascend," he reported, "but they have established positions around the base of the hill. I recognize several of them, warriors from the eastern border patrols. They hesitate to violate the sanctity of Seren Amroth," Erendil suggested. "The power here still repels them somewhat, but as night falls and the echo's strength grows." "Then we must be ready," Celebrían said firmly. "Take position here at the center of our preparations. Everything depends on what we accomplish tonight." As the last light of day faded from the sky, revealing a canopy of stars above, the small company gathered within the inner ring of white trees. The Nifredil blossoms formed an intricate pattern across the ground, concentric circles intersected by flowing lines that resembled musical notation. At key points within this pattern, the bark fragments inscribed with text from the annals had been placed, their surface somehow catching starlight and reflecting it upward. Celebrían took her position at the center of the design, dressed now in a simple white robe provided by Ithelwyn. Her silver hair hung loose around her shoulders, unbound as it had not been since she was a young maiden in the Golden Wood. Around her neck, she wore a delicate chain supporting a small crystal vial containing water from the Nimrodil, the closest representation of Nenya's power they could manage. "Remember," Erendil instructed softly, "focus first on the memory of your mother and her ring. Feel the connection between you, the bloodline that binds you to Nenya's power. Then expand your awareness to the song lines, the pathways that connect all elven realms across Middle-earth." Celebrían closed her eyes, centering herself as she had been taught long ago. In her mind, she called up the image of her mother, regal Galadriel with Nenya gleaming upon her finger, its power flowing outward to protect and preserve Lothlorien through the long centuries. She remembered the subtle resonance she had always felt in her mother's presence, a harmonic note that sang just at the edge of perception. "I feel it," she whispered, "a thread of silver light stretching from where I stand too, somewhere beyond the circles of the world." "Follow it back," Ithelwyn advised. "Not forward to where your mother now dwells, but backward, to the impressions Nenya left upon Middle-earth. The ring is gone, but its echo remains, particularly here in Lothlorien." Celebrían adjusted her focus, tracing the silver thread not outward but inward, into the soil beneath her feet, the air around her, the very essence of the realm her mother had protected for so long. As she did so, the Nifredil blossoms began to glow more intensely, their light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Yes," Erendil whispered, observing the response of their preparations. "You're connecting with Nenya's imprint. Now, reach for the song lines that will lead you to the other anchors." With her inner sense now attuned to the lingering presence of Nenya, Celebrían expanded her awareness further. At first, she perceived nothing beyond the hill where they stood. Then, gradually, she became conscious of something like music, not heard with ears but felt through the very fabric of her being. Patterns of harmony and counterpoint, rhythms that echoed the movements of stars and seasons, melodies that had played since the dawn of creation. "The song lines," she breathed, wonder filling her voice. "I can feel them, like rivers of light flowing beneath the surface of the world." "Follow the one that leads northward," Erendil guided. "Seek the impression of Vilya, the ring of air, and through it, a connection to those who share blood with its bearer." Celebrían turned her inner attention northward, tracing one of the flowing patterns of light and music. The songline stretched across forests and plains, across the misty mountains and into the hidden valley beyond. There, in Imladris, Rivendell as men called it, she sensed the lingering presence of Vilya, its impression strongest in the last homely house where Elrond had dwelled for millennia. And there, moving through those halls, she sensed them, her sons, Eladin and Elrohir, their essence recognizable to her as clearly as if they stood before her. More distant in her perception was her daughter Arwen, who had chosen a mortal path and whose connection to the elven song lines had consequently diminished. Eladin, she called with her mind, focusing all her concentration on reaching across the vast distance. Rohir, hear me, my sons. For several heartbeats, there was no response. Then faintly, as if from an immense distance, she felt a stirring of awareness. Surprise, recognition, questions forming in minds suddenly alert to an unexpected contact. Mother, the response came not in words but in a pulse of emotion and intent that she interpreted through their familial bond. How is this possible? You sailed west with grandmother. I remain in Middle-earth for a time, she communicated, struggling to maintain the tenuous connection. A threat awakens in Lothlorien, one that endangers all that remains of the elven realms. I need your help, my sons. She felt their immediate concern, their instant readiness to ride to her aid. Quickly, conserving the energy of the connection, she explained the nature of the Black Echo and what they sought to accomplish. The ritual requiring 3 anchors connected to the 3 rings. As Elrond's sons, you share his blood and thus his connection to Vilya, she explained. One of you must serve as the second anchor in our binding ritual. You must open yourself to the remnant power of the Ring of Air, channel it as your father did. Confusion, doubt, then determination. Tell us what must be done, came their joint response. As clearly as she could, Celebrían transmitted the knowledge Eärendil had shared with her, how to attune themselves to Vilya's lingering presence, how to position themselves within Elrond's former chambers where the ring's influence remained strongest, and how to recognize when the connection was properly established. Tonight, she instructed, when the stars are at their zenith, that is when we will attempt to complete the ritual. Agreement, determination, love. The emotions flowed back along the tenuous connection before it began to fade, the immense distance finally overcoming even the power of the song lines to bridge it. As Celebrían refocused her awareness, she found herself trembling with exertion, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool evening air. I reached them, she said aloud to the anxious faces watching her. Eladin and Rohir. They will be ready when the time comes. Well done, Eärendil said with evident relief. The first connection is established. Now you must reach westward to the Grey Havens and Círdan. Give her a moment to recover, Ithilwyn cautioned, noticing Celebrían's exhaustion. Reaching across such distances taxes even the strongest Fae. While Celebrían rested briefly, Thalion approached with news from the perimeter. The creatures below have begun to climb, he reported grimly. Slowly, as if fighting against some resistance but advancing nonetheless. And there are other things joining them now, shapes I cannot clearly identify in the darkness. The echo gathers all it can control, Eärendil said. How long can we hold them off? Thalion considered, his experienced eye evaluating their defensive position. The slope works in our favor, and the white trees create a natural barrier. With 6 warriors, we can maintain a defense for perhaps 2 hours, maybe 3 if we're fortunate. After that, he left the implication hanging. Then we have until midnight, Celebrían decided, pushing herself back to her feet. I must reach Círdan now, while the songlines still shine clearly. Taking her position once more at the center of the Nifredil pattern, Celebrían closed her eyes and re-established her connection to Nenya's lingering presence. This time, having done it once before, she found the process slightly easier, though still demanding. Again, the flowers began to glow in rhythm with her heartbeat, and again she perceived the flowing patterns of the song lines spreading out across Middle-earth. She turned her awareness westward, following a song line that stretched across plains and hills, through the realm of Arnor and beyond, to where the land met the sea at the Gulf of Lune. There, at Mithlond, the Grey Havens. She sensed another resonance, different from Vilya's airy presence but equally powerful in its own way. Narya, the Ring of Fire, whose impression remained strong in the haven Círdan had maintained since the First Age. Finding Círdan himself proved more challenging. Unlike her sons, with whom she shared a blood connection, the ancient shipwright was known to her primarily through formal meetings and councils. She had to search carefully, scanning the Grey Havens with her inner sense until she located a presence that matched what she knew of him. Wisdom accumulated over thousands of years, steadfast purpose, and a deep connection to both the sea and the straight road that led to Valinor. Lord Círdan, she called into the vast distance. Hear me, shipwright of the havens. There was a long pause, during which Celebrían feared her strength might fail before making contact. Then suddenly, she felt an awareness turn toward her, ancient, powerful, and startled by the unexpected contact. Lady Celebrían. The response came with surprising clarity, suggesting Círdan's long experience with the three rings had given him greater facility with such communications. This is unexpected. I had thought you sailed west with the other ring-bearers. I remained, she explained, grateful for his quick comprehension that made the exchange less taxing. A threat arises in Lothlorien, one that concerns all who would preserve what remains of the Elven realms in Middle-earth. With efficient precision, she relayed the nature of the Black Echo and their desperate plan to reinforce the failing bindings. Círdan's response was thoughtful, measured, the reaction of one who had witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms and had learned patience through millennia of life. What you propose is dangerous, he observed, drawing upon the remnant power of the three without their physical presence or their bearer's guidance. And for one such as myself, who stands at the threshold of departure. He paused, and Celebrían sensed him weighing consequences both immediate and far-reaching. The alternative is to allow this ancient evil to awaken fully, she reminded him. Its influence already spreads throughout Lothlorien. Soon it will reach beyond, affecting realms of elves and men alike. Another pause, shorter this time. Very well. Though I prepare to depart these shores, I will not abandon Middle-earth to darkness in its final hour of need. What must I do? Celebrían shared the necessary information. How to position himself within the chamber where Narya had been kept for ages. How to attune his Fe to its lingering presence. How to recognize when the connection was properly established with the other anchors. Tonight, she instructed, as she had with her sons. When the stars reach their zenith, that is when we will attempt to complete the ritual. I will be ready, Círdan assured her. Though I must warn you, the echo of Narya fades quickly here. Many preparations for departure are already complete. The havens grow emptier with each passing day. All the more reason to act now, while enough power remains, Celebrían replied. May Elbereth guide your efforts, Lord Círdan. And yours, Lady of Lothlorien, came his formal response, before the connection began to fade. Celebrían opened her eyes to find herself once again drained, her limbs trembling with fatigue. The Nifredil pattern glowed brightly now, suffusing the summit of Seren Amroth with soft white light that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. It is done, she announced to the anxious faces surrounding her. Both connections are established. When midnight comes, we will attempt the binding. Good, Thalion said, relief evident in his voice, because our time grows short. He gestured toward the slope of the hill where shadowy figures could now be seen advancing upward. The wolves came first, their eyes reflecting the light of the Nifredil in eerie green pinpoints. Behind them moved the enthralled elves, their once graceful movements now jerky and unnatural. And beyond these, deeper shadows lurked, formless things that seemed to flow rather than walk, their nature impossible to discern in the darkness. Take defensive positions, Celebrían ordered, forcing strength into her voice despite her exhaustion. "We must hold until midnight, not a moment less." The Galadrim warriors moved to form a protective ring around the ritual site, positioning themselves between the white trees that marked the inner circle of Seren Amroth. Thalion directed their deployment with the expertise gained through centuries of service, creating overlapping fields of defense that would maximize their limited numbers. As they prepared for battle, Eärendil approached Celebrían, the soul shard crystal glowing more intensely around his neck. "You should rest while you can," he advised. "The third phase will demand even more of your strength than the first two combined." "What exactly will happen when we attempt the binding?" she asked. The annals were unclear on this point. Eärendil's expression turned solemn. "When the three anchors align properly, a conduit will form, a channel through which power can flow from the remnants of the three rings to the original binding beneath Dol Guldur. I will use Amroth's soul shard to direct that power, shape it according to the patterns he established long ago. And the cost to you?" His smile was gentle but resolute. "The shard will be consumed entirely, and with it, the unnatural extension of life it has granted me, whether my physical form survives the process." He shrugged slightly. "That is in the hands of powers greater than ourselves." Before Celebrían could respond, the silence of the night was broken by a chilling sound. Howls from the wolves surrounding the hill, but not natural howls. These contained words distorted and painful to elven ears. "The echo calls, the binding breaks, the sleeper wakes." "It begins," Ethelwyn said softly, her colorless eyes wide with a vision only she could see. "The servants of the echo make their move, and behind them, driving them forward." She shuddered visibly. "The black echo itself reaches out, extending tendrils of influence across the distance from Dol Guldur." As if in confirmation of her words, the air around Seren Amroth seemed to thicken, taking on a quality that made breathing slightly more difficult. The stars overhead dimmed perceptibly, as if viewed through a veil of dark smoke. And from the direction of Dol Guldur came a sound just at the threshold of hearing, a deep, rhythmic pulsation like the heartbeat of some vast organism. "To arms!" Thalion shouted as the first wolves reached the upper slopes, charging toward the ring of defenders. "Stand fast for Lothlorien." The battle erupted with sudden ferocity. Wolves leaped at the Galadrim warriors, their movements coordinated with unnatural precision. The elves met them with flashing blades, their own movements fluid and deadly despite being outnumbered. For every wolf that fell, another took its place, climbing relentlessly up the slope of the sacred hill. Behind the wolves came the enthralled elves, former friends and comrades now moving with puppet-like obedience to the echo's will. The defenders hesitated to strike against their own kind, a hesitation the controlled elves did not share. One of the Galadrim fell, an arrow from a familiar bow piercing his shoulder. "Do not kill them if you can avoid it," Celebrían commanded, seeing the anguish in her warriors' faces. "They are not themselves. Incapacitate, disarm, but spare their lives if possible." The fighting intensified as more creatures reached the summit. The defensive ring began to contract, the Galadrim gradually forced back toward the inner circle where the ritual preparations lay. Thalion fought with the skill of centuries, his blade a blur as he moved from one threat to another, protecting the others as much as possible. "How much longer?" he called over his shoulder, dispatching a wolf that had broken through the line. Ethelwyn glanced at the stars. "Half an hour until midnight. The alignment approaches." "We may not have half an hour," Thalion replied grimly, nodding toward the eastern edge of the summit where the formless shadows had begun to coalesce into something more substantial, writhing masses of darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than merely block it. "What are those?" one of the younger guards asked, fear evident in his voice. "Manifestations," Eärendil explained, his hand clutching the soul shard that now pulsed with increasingly erratic light. Extensions of the black echo itself, reaching out from Dol Guldur. Its consciousness spreads, taking form as it comes. Celebrían surveyed their deteriorating position, making a swift decision. "We begin now," she announced. "We cannot wait for perfect alignment. Thalion, contract the defensive ring to the inner circle of trees. Everyone else, take your positions for the ritual." As the remaining Galadrim formed a tight circle around the Nifredil pattern, Celebrían returned to her position at its center. Ithilwyn stood at the western point of the design, representing the connection to Círdan and Narya. Eärendil took the northern position, from which he would facilitate the link to Eladin and Elrohir and Vilya. The eastern position remained empty, a gap in their formation that troubled Celebrían but could not be helped given their limited numbers. "What of the southern anchor?" she asked Eärendil. The pattern in the annals showed 4 points, not 3. "Amroth stood at the southern point in the original ritual," he explained. "His soul shard will have to serve in his absence." He removed the crystal from around his neck, its light now pulsating rapidly. "When I give the word, focus on your connection to Nenya's imprint, as you did before. I will attempt to synchronize with the other 2 anchors." Around them, the battle intensified. The shadows from the east had taken more definite form now, vaguely humanoid but with proportions that seemed wrong, limbs too long or bent at impossible angles. Where they touched the white trees of the inner circle, the bark blackened and withered. "Now," Eärendil called, raising the soul shard high above his head, "before we are overwhelmed." Celebrían closed her eyes, focusing once more on the lingering presence of Nenya. It came more easily this time, the connection strengthened by her previous efforts. She felt the silver thread of its power, traced it through the soil and air of Lothlorien, then expanded her awareness to the song lines that connected to Rivendell and the Grey Havens. To her relief, she sensed both her sons and Círdan already in position, their fea attuned to the remnants of Vilya and Narya as she had instructed. The 3 points of contact, Nenya through Celebrían, Vilya through Eladin and Elrohir, Narya through Círdan, formed a triangle across the vast expanse of Middle-earth, a geometric pattern of power that began to resonate in harmony. "I feel it," she gasped, as energy flowed into her from the other 2 anchors. "The connection forms." Eärendil raised his voice in a chant from the annals, words in a dialect of Sindarin, so ancient it predated the sundering of the elves. As he spoke, he placed Amroth's soul shard on the ground at the southern point of their formation, completing the pattern. The crystal's light synchronized with the pulsing glow of the Nifredil, creating a rhythmic illumination that pushed back against the encroaching shadows. Around them, the battle reached a crescendo. Thalion and the remaining guards fought with desperate courage, their blades slick with the blood of wolves and darker creatures. The enthralled elves had formed a ring around the hill's summit, knocking arrows to bows that had once defended Lothlorien but now turned against its last free defenders. "Focus," Ithilwyn called over the sounds of combat. "Feel the pattern forming. See it in your mind's eye, a web of light stretching from here to Rivendell to the Grey Havens, triangulating on Dol Guldur." Celebrían did as instructed, visualizing the connections between the 3 anchors not as straight lines, but as curves that intersected precisely at the location of the ancient hill beneath the dreaded fortress. As the pattern came into focus in her mind, she felt a surge of power flow through her. Not the gentle, preserving influence of Nenya as her mother had wielded it, but something rawer, more primal, drawn from the deepest memories of Middle-earth itself. "The binding pattern," Eärendil called, his voice strained as he directed the flow of energy. "Remember it as I showed you from the annals, 3 interlocking spirals converging on a central point." With effort, Celebrían shaped the wild energy flowing through her, imposing the pattern Eärendil had described. She sensed her sons and Círdan doing the same, their combined will forcing the power into the necessary configuration. The Nifredil blazed now with blinding intensity, their light forming visible beams that shot upward into the night sky. Above Seren Amroth, the stars seemed to respond, their light intensifying until constellations stood out in sharp relief against the blackness. Directly overhead, 3 stars in different parts of the sky began to pulse in rhythm with the Nifredil below, one silver, one blue, one red, marking the positions of the 3 anchors as reflected in the heavens. "It's working," Ithelwyn cried, her colorless eyes reflecting the starlight. "The pattern forms." But even as hope surged through them, a new threat emerged. The formless shadows that had been attacking the perimeter suddenly withdrew, flowing together into a single mass of darkness that rose up like a wave poised to crash down upon the ritual site. Within its undulating surface, faces formed and dissolved, expressions of rage, pain, and hunger that transcended individual identity. "The echo itself," Eärendil gasped, his hands shaking as he struggled to maintain his direction of the energy flow. "It senses what we attempt and moves to stop us." The wave of darkness surged forward, engulfing 2 of the Galadrim guards before the others could react. Where it touched them, their forms simply unraveled, flesh and bone dissolving into the greater mass of shadow. Thalion and the remaining guards fell back to the very edge of the ritual pattern, forming a last line of defense. "We can't hold it," Thalion shouted, his blade passing harmlessly through the encroaching darkness. "Whatever you're doing, finish it now." Celebrían felt panic threatening to disrupt her concentration. The binding pattern was forming, but too slowly, the energy still building, the connections between anchors still strengthening. They needed more time, but time was the one thing their enemies would not grant them. In that moment of crisis, Ithelwyn stepped forward, moving to the eastern edge of the pattern directly in the path of the advancing shadow. Her pale eyes gleamed with acceptance and determination. "For Lothlorien," she said simply. Then, raising her hands, the seer began to sing, not in any elvish tongue known to those present, but in what seemed to be the language of the stars themselves, notes that resonated with the very fabric of creation. Where her voice reached, the shadow halted, unable to advance against the ancient power she channeled. Light emanated from her slender form, not the soft glow of the Nifredil but something harsher, more primordial, the light of stars as they were when the world was young. "Complete the binding," she called to Celebrían, her voice strained with effort. "I cannot hold it long." Understanding that Ithelwyn had sacrificed herself to buy them precious moments, Celebrían redoubled her concentration on the binding pattern. She reached out to her sons and to Círdan, their minds now linked through the power flowing between them, and together they forced the final convergence of energies. The 3 interlocking spirals of power snapped into perfect alignment, creating a conduit that stretched from Seren Amroth to Dol Guldur. Through this conduit, the combined essence of the 3 rings, or rather, the echo of their presence left behind in Middle-earth, began to flow, directed by Eärendil through Amroth's soul shard. "Now," he cried, his form beginning to shimmer as the power flowed through him. "The final binding." With a gesture that seemed to tear at the very fabric of his being, Eärendil thrust the full force of the channeled power toward Dol Guldur. The Soul Shard. Chapter 4. The Echo Contained. The soul shard on the ground exploded with blinding light, transforming from crystal to pure energy that shot skyward in a pillar of radiance. The beam arced eastward, bending through the night toward the distant silhouette of Dol Guldur, its trajectory visible for leagues in all directions. Celebrían felt the power flow through her, around her, past her, raw and ancient, drawn from the deepest memories of Middle-earth. It stripped away pretense and illusion, revealing the true nature of all it touched. In that moment of absolute clarity, she understood why the ring-bearers had chosen to depart these shores. To channel such power for centuries, to feel it gradually diminishing with the changing of the world, the sweet, slow agony of it would break even the strongest heart. At the eastern edge of their formation, Ethelwyn's resistance faltered. The wall of darkness surged forward, engulfing her slender form. For one terrible moment, her silhouette remained visible within the shadow, her arms still raised in defiance. Then she dissolved, her fate departing her physical form rather than submitting to the echo's corruption. "Ethelwyn!" Thalion cried, lunging forward as if to rescue her, though nothing remained to save. "Hold your position," Celebrían commanded, her voice carrying unnatural force as power continued to course through her. "Her sacrifice must not be in vain." The shadow paused briefly, as if disoriented by consuming the seer, then resumed its advance toward the center of the ritual site. Thalion and the two remaining guards stood firm, though their weapons had proven useless against this manifestation of the Black Echo. In that desperate moment, Eärendil staggered to his feet. His form flickered between solidity and transparency as the ritual consumed his life force, but determination burned in his amber eyes. With trembling hands, he reached into his tunic and withdrew a small pouch. "Dust from Amroth's crown," he gasped, his voice barely audible over the roaring energy that surrounded them. "Saved for the final need." Before anyone could stop him, he tore open the pouch and cast its contents into the advancing shadow. Where the glittering particles touched the darkness, they ignited like tiny stars, burning holes in its undulating surface. The shadow recoiled, emitting a sound that was not quite a scream but conveyed agony nonetheless. "The binding forms," Eärendil announced, swaying on his feet as more of his essence poured into the ritual. "I can feel it taking hold beneath Dol Guldur, but it needs more strength." Celebrían understood what he wasn't saying. The power flowing through the three anchors was sufficient to create the binding, but not to make it permanent. Without something to seal it, to lock it in place, the Black Echo would eventually break free again, perhaps in decades rather than centuries. "What can we do?" she asked, maintaining her position even as exhaustion threatened to overcome her. Eärendil smiled sadly. "What Amroth did before me, a final sacrifice." He looked toward the remains of his soul shard, now a pool of liquid light at the southern point of their formation. "My bloodline has carried his essence for generations, preparing for this moment. Now I return what was borrowed with interest." Before Celebrían could protest, Eärendil stepped into the pool of light. Immediately, his form began to dissolve, not in the horrific unraveling caused by the shadow, but in a gentle transition from physical to spiritual. As his body faded, his fate became visible to elven eyes, a luminous presence that retained his shape briefly before merging with the power flowing through their ritual. "The seal," he called, his voice now seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "It forms." Celebrían felt the change in the energy pattern, as Eärendil's essence integrated with it. The three interlocking spirals of power that had formed their binding suddenly acquired a fourth dimension, folding inward upon themselves in a geometric configuration no physical mind could properly conceive. The pattern locked into place with an almost audible click that resonated through the fabric of reality itself. The beam of light connecting Seren Amroth to Dol Guldur intensified one final time, then collapsed inward, withdrawing from the sky like water down a drain. At the same moment, the shadow manifestation surrounding them convulsed violently. Ripples of dissonant energy passed through its amorphous form, breaking it into smaller fragments that began to dissipate like mist under a hot sun. "It worked," Thalion breathed, watching as the darkness retreated down the slopes of Seren Amroth. The binding holds. Celebrían maintained her focus a moment longer, ensuring the connection with the other two anchors remained stable until the binding fully settled. She felt her son's exhaustion matching her own, and Círdan's ancient wisdom guiding the final adjustments to the pattern. Then, gradually, the flow of power diminished, the conduit narrowed, and the connection between the three anchors gently dissolved. With its dissolution came a profound sense of loss. For a brief time, Celebrían had touched the kind of power her mother had wielded for centuries through Nenya. She had glimpsed the burden Galadriel had carried, and understood more deeply why the ring-bearers had chosen to depart Middle-earth rather than remain to witness the gradual fading of all they had preserved. As the last traces of the ritual's energy dissipated, Celebrían swayed on her feet, utterly drained. Thalion moved swiftly to support her, his own exhaustion evident in the heaviness of his movements. "What of the controlled creatures?" she asked, looking toward the slopes where wolves and enthralled elves had encircled them. "Look," one of the guards said, pointing downward. The wolves lay still or wandered in confusion, the unnatural coordination gone from their movements. The elves who had fallen under the echo's influence stood or sat in similar states of disorientation, some weeping, others staring blankly as if waking from terrible nightmares. "The echo's hold is broken," Thalion confirmed, "though at terrible cost." Celebrían nodded solemnly, looking to where Ethelwyn had made her stand. Nothing remained of the seer, not body, not artifact, not even a disturbance in the grass where she had stood. It was as if she had never existed, save in the memories of those who had witnessed her final sacrifice. Of Eärendil, slightly more remained: the empty pouch that had contained Amroth's dust, and a single amber bead that had adorned his hair, now lying in the center of a scorched circle where the soul shard had transformed into pure light. "They will be remembered," Celebrían promised, bending with effort to retrieve the bead. "Their sacrifices honored as long as any elves remain in Middle-earth to tell their tale." "And how long will that be, my lady?" Thalion asked quietly. "With the power of the three rings gone from the world, with Lothlorien's magic fading like autumn leaves." The question hung in the night air, unanswerable yet impossible to ignore. Around them, Seren Amroth remained untouched by the corruption that had threatened it. The white trees still stood proudly. The Nifredil still bloomed despite the deepening autumn. But beyond this sacred hill, the rest of Lothlorien showed signs of change that could not be reversed. "Long enough," Celebrían finally replied. "Long enough to ensure all that was beautiful and worthy passes into memory rather than oblivion. Long enough to prepare those who will inherit Middle-earth from us." She looked westward, where the stars still shone brightly over distant mountains. Beyond those mountains lay the Grey Havens, where Círdan prepared the last ships that would carry the remaining elves into the west. And beyond the sea itself lay Valinor, where her husband Elrond and her mother Galadriel now dwelled, waiting for her to join them. The pull of that distant shore tugged at her fair, stronger now that she had glimpsed the full extent of what was fading from Middle-earth. Yet something held her still, a sense of responsibility not yet fulfilled, of tasks not yet completed. "We should return to Kara's Galadhin," Thalion suggested, breaking into her thoughts. "Those affected by the echo will need care, and we must send word to Rivendell and the Grey Havens of what has transpired." "Yes," Celebrían agreed, forcing strength back into her voice. "There is much to be done, and the night grows late. Help me gather what remains of our companions. We will honor them properly when we return." As they collected their sparse belongings and prepared to descend the hill, Celebrían paused for one final look eastward toward Dol Guldur. The fortress was barely visible in the darkness, a blacker silhouette against the night sky. Yet she could sense the change there, the ancient evil beneath it now bound once more, locked away by a seal that would hold for how long she could not say. Perhaps long enough for the last elves to depart Middle-earth. Perhaps longer if the patterns they had established proved resilient. Either way, they had won a victory this night, not the kind celebrated in songs of glory or tales of mighty deeds, but the quieter triumph of preventing disaster, of maintaining the world as it was for a while longer, allowing the natural course of its changing to proceed without the catastrophic intervention of ancient malice. It was, Celebrían reflected, a fitting final act for the elves of Middle-earth, not conquest or domination, but preservation and protection, even as they themselves prepared to fade from the lands they had loved. The return to Kara's Galadriel took place in solemn procession. Word of what had occurred spread quickly among the Galadrim, and many came out to line the paths as Celebrían and the survivors of Seren Amroth passed. Those who had fallen under the echo's influence were tended to with compassion, though many would bear the scars of that experience in their spirits for whatever time they remained in Middle-earth. In the days that followed, messages arrived from both Rivendell and the Grey Havens, confirming what Celebrían already knew. The ritual had succeeded, the binding had held. Her sons reported sensing a change in the very air of Middle-earth, as if a subtle discord that had been building had suddenly resolved itself into harmony. Certain wrote of similar observations from the mariners who sailed the Gulf of Lune, speaking of stars that shone with renewed clarity and seas that moved with more natural rhythm. A week after their return, Celebrían stood on one of the highest flets of Kara's Galadriel, watching golden leaves continue their steady descent from the Mallorn trees. Autumn deepened across Lothlorien, but it was a natural autumn now, untainted by the malevolent influence that had threatened to corrupt it. "The reports from the eastern borders are encouraging," Thalion said, joining her on the flet. "No sign of unnatural activity around Dol Guldur. The wildlife returns to normal patterns, and the trees show no further signs of blight." "Good," Celebrían nodded, "though we must maintain vigilance. What was bound once and then awakened could potentially stir again, given enough time." "Time," Thalion echoed thoughtfully. "How much remains to us, I wonder?" It was the question that hung unspoken in every conversation among the elves of Lothlorien these days. With Galadriel's departure and the fading of Nenya's power, the natural progression of the world reasserted itself more strongly with each passing day. The protection that had preserved the Golden Wood for thousands of years was withdrawing, leaving it vulnerable to the normal passage of seasons and years. "I've been considering that question since our return from Seren Amroth," Celebrían admitted, "and I believe I now have an answer, at least for myself." She turned to face her captain fully, noting the subtle signs of exhaustion that lingered in his features despite the week of rest. "I will remain in Lothlorien until next spring," she announced. "Long enough to see the Melian bloom one final time, to ensure the binding at Dol Guldur remains secure, and to properly prepare our people for what must come next." "And then?" Thalion asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Then I will journey to the Grey Havens, where Certain prepares a ship that will carry me into the west." She smiled faintly. "It is time, Thalion. I have delayed longer than most expected, ensuring all was in order here. But my heart calls me to rejoin my husband and mother in Valinor." The captain bowed his head in acknowledgement, his own decision visible in his eyes. "Many will follow you, my lady. Yet some of us must remain a while longer, to oversee the final fading," she agreed, "to ensure what we leave behind passes into memory with dignity rather than abandonment." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "I would ask you to lead those who stay, Thalion. None understands better than you what must be preserved and what must be allowed to change." Pride mingled with sorrow in his expression as he bowed formally. "I am honored by your trust, Lady Celebrían. We will maintain Lothlorien as long as it is possible to do so, then ensure its legacy endures in song and story." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, one of the younger Galadrim who had been assigned to the western watch posts. He bowed hastily, excitement evident in his manner. "My lady," Captain Thalion, visitors approach from the west. A small company on horseback led by. He hesitated, as if unsure whether to believe his own report. Led by the Lady Arwen Undomiel. Surprise registered on both their faces. "My daughter comes from Rivendell," Celebrían asked, joy mingling with confusion. "Did she send word ahead that I missed?" "No, my lady," the messenger replied. "They arrived without notice at the western borders. The Lady Arwen is accompanied by several elves from Rivendell and—" he paused again, "a man of the north. They request permission to enter Kara's Galadhin." Celebrían's heart quickened. Arwen had remained in Rivendell when Elrond departed, her decision to stay in Middle-earth tied to reasons she had shared with few. That she would journey to Lothlorien now, after the binding of the Black Echo, with a mortal companion no less, suggested matters of great significance. "Prepare for their arrival," she instructed the messenger. "Have quarters made ready and a welcome feast arranged. I will greet them myself at the city gates." As the messenger hurried away, Thalion gave her a questioning look. A man of the north accompanying Lady Arwen. Could it be? "We shall soon see," Celebrían replied, though her mother's foresight, occasionally manifesting in her own thoughts, suggested possibilities that both troubled and intrigued her. "Whatever brings my daughter to Lothlorien as autumn deepens, I suspect it connects to the greater patterns now unfolding in Middle-earth." The reunion between mother and daughter took place at the western entrance to Kara's Galadhin as evening approached. Arwen Undomiel, the Evenstar of her people, dismounted gracefully from her white palfrey, her beauty undimmed by the lengthy journey. Behind her rode her brothers, Eladin and Elrohir, looking weary but satisfied, as if having completed a task of great importance. And with them, sitting tall on a gray stallion, was a man whose bearing marked him as more than an ordinary mortal. "Mother," Arwen said simply, embracing Celebrían with the warmth of long separation. "We came as swiftly as we could after the binding." "You felt it then?" Celebrían asked, returning the embrace while studying her daughter's face, searching for signs of the choice she suspected Arwen had made. "All of Rivendell felt it," Eladin confirmed, dismounting to greet his mother formally. "The moment the binding took hold, it was as if a weight lifted from the very air of Middle-earth, a discordance we had grown so accustomed to that we only noticed it by its absence. Father foresaw something of this before he departed," Elrohir added, joining them. "He spoke of one final challenge that would face the elves who remained behind, a test of whether we could maintain what the three rings had preserved, even in their absence." Celebrían nodded, understanding dawning. "So he prepared you for the role you would play as Vilia's anchor. He left instructions with Arrestor, to be shared only if certain signs appeared," Eladin explained. "When we felt the stirring from the direction of Dol Guldur, when reports came of unnatural behavior spreading through the forests of Lothlorien, we knew the time had come." Celebrían turned her attention to the mortal rider, who had remained a respectful distance behind her children. He was tall and well-formed, with keen gray eyes that held both wisdom and sorrow beyond his apparent years. Though dressed simply as a ranger of the north might be, something in his manner hinted at heritage greater than common men. "And who is your companion?" she asked, though in her heart she suspected the answer. Arwen's face softened as she gestured for the man to approach. "Mother, may I present Aragorn, son of Arathorn, chieftain of the Dunedain and heir of Isildur." The man dismounted and bowed, with the grace of one educated among elves. "Lady Celebrían," he greeted her in flawless Sindarin. "It is an honor to meet the mother of Arwen Undolmiel, and the daughter of Lady Galadriel, whose wisdom is renowned throughout all lands." Celebrían studied him carefully, seeing beyond the weathered exterior to the lineage that flowed through his veins, the blood of Númenor, the potential for greatness that had long slumbered in the scattered remnants of that fallen kingdom. "Welcome to Lothlorien, Aragorn, son of Arathorn," she replied formally. "Though I confess, your presence here alongside my daughter speaks of matters beyond a simple visit." A look passed between Arwen and Aragorn, a glance laden with meaning that confirmed Celebrían's suspicions even before her daughter spoke. "We have much to discuss, Mother," Arwen said quietly. "About the future of Middle-earth, about the choices that lie before us all, and about the path I have chosen to walk." Celebrían nodded, feeling both the inevitability of what was coming and a mother's natural concern. "Then let us speak in private, after you have rested from your journey. Kara's Galadhin offers what hospitality remains within our power to provide." As they proceeded into the city, golden leaves continued to fall around them, marking the deepening autumn of Lothlorien. Yet in the midst of this fading, Celebrían sensed something else, a current of renewal, of possibility, flowing through the arrival of her children and this mortal heir of kings. Perhaps, she thought, watching Arwen walk beside Aragorn, their hands occasionally brushing in a gesture too intimate to be accidental, the autumn of the elves in Middle-earth was not merely an ending but a transition, a necessary change to allow new growth, new patterns to emerge from the soil of an ancient world. That evening, after the welcome feast had concluded, and most of Kara's Galadhin had retired for the night, Celebrían sat with her daughter in the privacy of her chambers. The Mallorn tree that housed her flet creaked gently in the night breeze, a sound that had once been comforting but now reminded her of the gradual return to nature that awaited all elven works in Middle-earth. "You love him," Celebrían said simply, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. It was not a question. Arwen's gaze remained steady, though emotion shimmered in the depths of her eyes. "With a completeness I never thought possible," she admitted. "From the moment we met in the gardens of Rivendell, it was as if a music I had always heard distantly suddenly played clearly for the first time. And you understand what loving him means," Celebrían pressed gently. "The choice that lies before you is the same that faced Lothlorien long ago." "Mortality," Arwen whispered, the word hanging in the air between them. "Yes, I understand what I must surrender if I bind myself to him. Father made certain of that before he departed." Celebrían felt both pride and sorrow well within her. Pride at her daughter's courage to follow her heart's truth, sorrow for what it would mean for their family. "He will be king one day," Arwen continued, a quiet certainty in her voice. "Not soon, perhaps not for many years, but the time approaches when the heir of Isildur must claim his birthright." The binding of the Black Echo was but one thread in a greater tapestry, now being woven across Middle-earth. "You have seen this?" Celebrían asked, recognizing the tone of foresight that sometimes marked those of her mother's lineage. "Glimpses only," Arwen replied, "and dreams that feel more substantial than waking. A darkness gathering in the east, different from what you confronted at Dol Guldur but no less dangerous. A quest upon which all hopes will hang. A king returning when hope seems lost." She leaned forward, taking her mother's hands in her own. "The age of elves in Middle-earth draws to its close, as we have all felt. But what rises to take its place need not be lesser, only different. Aragorn represents that potential future, the best of what men might become, if properly guided through the transition." Celebrían studied her daughter's face, seeing in it the same serene determination that had marked Galadriel's countenance when confronting the greatest challenges. There would be no dissuading Arwen from the path she had chosen, and perhaps Celebrían realized that was as it should be. "Does he know," she asked softly, "what you would sacrifice for him?" "We have spoken of it," Arwen answered. "He initially refused to accept such a gift, believing himself unworthy of what it would cost me. It took time to help him understand that the choice is mine to make, and that love freely given is never truly a sacrifice, even when it comes with consequences." Celebrían nodded slowly, memories of her own choice to bind herself to Elrond surfacing in her mind. Though it had not required the surrender of immortality, every significant choice carried its own form of renunciation, paths not taken, potentials unrealized. "I sail for Valinor in the spring," she said after a moment of reflection. "My time in Middle-earth draws to its close, as does that of many of our people. I had hoped, expected, you would eventually follow once your brothers were ready to depart as well. And now you understand why I cannot," Arwen said gently. "Yes." Celebrían squeezed her daughter's hands, accepting what could not be changed. "If you are certain of this path, if your heart has truly chosen, then all I can offer is my blessing and the hope that the years granted to you, however they are measured, bring fulfillment and joy." Relief washed across Arwen's features, though it was tinged with the understanding that this moment marked a permanent fork in their family's history. Mother and daughter separated not just by seas, but by the ultimate barrier between mortal and immortal lives. "What of Eladin and Elrohir?" Celebrían asked. "Have they decided whether to embrace the mortality of their human ancestry or to remain among the firstborn?" "They delay their choice," Arwen replied with a small smile. "Both feel their work in Middle-earth remains unfinished, especially now that they understand Aragorn's destiny. They will stand with him in the coming conflicts, offering what guidance and protection they can." Celebrían nodded, understanding her son's decision. They had always been more engaged with the affairs of men than many elves, riding with the Dunlending and fighting alongside mortal allies against the remnants of Sauron's forces. "And you?" Arwen asked, her voice softening. "These months since father and grandmother departed, have they brought you clarity about your own path?" "They have," Celebrían confirmed, "especially after what transpired at Seren Amroth. I have seen both the fading and the potential renewal of Middle-earth. I have glimpsed what remains possible even as the power of the elves diminishes. But my heart lies across the sea now, with your father, with the healing that Valinor offers." She gazed out the window at the star-filled sky, where Arendil's light gleamed brightly above the western horizon. "We each have our destinies to fulfill, it seems. Mine in the undying lands, yours here in the kingdoms of men." They sat in companionable silence for a time, mother and daughter united in mutual understanding, despite the divergent paths that lay before them. Outside, the autumn wind continued to carry golden leaves from the Mallorn trees, a steady reminder of the changes no power could halt. "Will you tell father?" Arwen finally asked, the question that had clearly weighed on her mind. "When you reach Valinor." Celebrían considered carefully before answering. The limitations of foresight meant that Elrond might already suspect his daughter's choice, but suspicion was not the same as certainty. "I will," she decided, "not to cause him pain, but because truth honors the love we share. He may already sense something of your decision, but hearing it confirmed will allow him to begin accepting what cannot be changed." "Thank you," Arwen whispered, gratitude evident in her voice. "Tell him also that I do not make this choice lightly, nor without understanding its full meaning. Tell him that the lessons he taught me, of courage, of responsibility, of finding one's true path, are what give me the strength to follow my heart, even knowing where it leads." Celebrían nodded, committing the words to memory. "I will tell him," she promised. "And I believe that in time, despite his sorrow, he will find peace in knowing you lived according to your deepest truth rather than the expectations of others. As their conversation drew to a close, Celebrían rose and moved to a small chest carved from Mallorn wood. From it, she withdrew a slender silver chain supporting a white gem that caught the lamplight and transformed it into rainbow hues. "This was given to me by my mother before she departed," she explained, returning to Arwen's side. "It is not as powerful as Nenya, but it carries a measure of protection nonetheless, a final blessing from Galadriel to the land she loved. I had intended to wear it during my journey to the Grey Havens, but I believe now it is meant for you." She placed the necklace around her daughter's neck, the gem coming to rest just below Arwen's throat. "Let it be a reminder of your lineage, of the light of the elves that will continue in you even as you walk a mortal path. And perhaps, in times of greatest need, it may offer some small assistance against the darkness that approaches." Arwen touched the gem with reverent fingers, understanding the significance of the gift. "I will treasure it always," she promised. "And in the years to come, when elves are but memories in the minds of men, I will ensure those memories honor the truth of who we were and what we gave to Middle-earth." Mother and daughter embraced once more, both understanding that their time together now had finite boundaries. The months until spring, when Celebrían would depart for the Grey Havens. Yet in their shared blood flowed the wisdom to recognize that endings were also beginnings, that autumn's falling leaves prepared the soil for spring's eventual renewal. Outside their window, a single golden leaf detached from its branch and drifted lazily through the night air, catching moonlight as it spiraled downward. Just before it would have touched the forest floor, a gentle breeze caught it, lifting it momentarily higher, carrying it toward new horizons beyond the boundaries of Lothlorien, toward lands where the legacy of the elves would continue in unexpected forms long after the last ship had sailed into the west. Chapter 5. Beyond the Fading. Spring came to Lothlorien with unexpected beauty. After the deep autumn and winter that followed the binding of the Black Echo, many had feared the Golden Wood would never again show the vibrant renewal that had marked countless seasons under Galadriel's protection. Yet as the days lengthened and warmth returned to the air, the Mallorn trees put forth new leaves of the palest green, their golden winter foliage falling away to reveal fresh growth beneath. "A final flourishing," Thalion observed as he walked beside Celebrían along the banks of the Nimrodal, "as if the land itself wishes to bid you farewell in splendor." Celebrían nodded, watching sunlight play through new leaves overhead. "Not farewell, perhaps, but transition. What occurs here is not an ending but a change, one long foretold but no less poignant for its inevitability." In the months since Arwen's arrival, preparations had steadily advanced for Celebrían's departure. Word had been sent to the Grey Havens, where certain confirmed a ship would be ready by mid-spring to carry her, and any who wished to accompany her across the sea to Valinor. Throughout Lothlorien, elves made their choices, some gathering possessions for the journey westward, others preparing to remain, at least for a time, as stewards of a fading realm. Arwen had spent the winter in close counsel with her mother, absorbing final wisdom and sharing insights about the future that awaited Middle-earth. Aragorn had departed after a fortnight, returning to his duties among the Dunlending, but not before an understanding had been reached between him and Celebrían, a mutual recognition of the love they each bore for Arwen, and the different forms that love would take in the years ahead. Eladin and Elrohir had remained in Lothlorien as well, their presence invaluable during the adjustment period following the binding ritual. They had worked closely with Thalion to establish new patterns of defense and governance that would serve the remaining Galadrim after Celebrían's departure, ensuring continuity amid transition. Now, with the day of departure less than a week away, Celebrían walked the paths of Lothlorien one final time, committing each beloved vista to memory, saying silent farewells to places that had shaped her life across millennia. The messengers report clear roads all the way to the Misty Mountains, Thalion informed her as they continued their walk. The company from Rivendell that will join your journey is already en route to the meeting point at the Gladden Fields. Good, Celebrían replied. And what of the other matter we discussed? Have you made your decision? Thalion's expression grew solemn. I have, my lady. I will remain in Lothlorien as we agreed, overseeing those who choose to stay. But when the last leaf falls from the last Mallorn, when there is no more that can be preserved without the power that once sustained us, I will lead whoever remains to the Grey Havens. A wise choice, she affirmed. Lothlorien deserves a dignified transition, not abandonment, and its people deserve leadership that understands both what must be maintained and what must be allowed to change. They walked in companionable silence for a time, the burbling of the Nimrodal providing gentle accompaniment to their thoughts. Celebrían found herself noticing small details with heightened awareness. The precise pattern of lichen on a stone, the delicate construction of a bird's nest among silver branches, the subtle variations in green as new leaves unfurled at different rates. Each observation felt precious, a final gift from a land that had nurtured her for so long. There is one place I must visit alone, she said as they approached a fork in the path. Will you meet me at the Great Hall this evening? There are final instructions I would share with the council before tomorrow's departure ceremony. Thalion bowed respectfully. Of course, my lady, until this evening. As he took the path leading back toward Kara's Galadhen, Celebrían continued straight, following the Nimrodal upstream toward a secluded glade she had visited infrequently over the centuries. It was a place of particular resonance, where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual seemed thinner than elsewhere, even in magic-suffused Lothlorien. The glade opened before her after a short walk, a perfect circle of grass surrounded by ancient Melian, whose silver trunks gleamed in the spring sunlight. At its center stood a single stone, smooth and white, inscribed with characters so old that few now living could read them. This had been Galadriel's private meditation space, a place where the Lady of the Golden Wood had come to commune with powers beyond Middle-earth, to seek guidance when decisions weighed heavily upon her. Now, as her daughter prepared to follow her into the west, Celebrían felt drawn to this sacred spot for her own communion with what remained of Lothlorien's deepest magic. She seated herself beside the white stone, resting her palm against its smooth surface. Immediately, she felt a subtle vibration, a resonance that traveled up her arm and into her core, connecting her more fully to the land around her. With practiced ease, she slipped into a meditative state, her awareness expanding beyond her physical form to embrace the forest itself. In this heightened perception, Lothlorien appeared to her inner eye as a vast tapestry of light and energy, golden threads connecting trees to soil to water to sky, all pulsing with the rhythm of life's endless cycle. Yet she could also perceive the changes occurring throughout this tapestry, places where threads had begun to fray, where patterns once meticulously maintained now unwound with gentle insistence, returning to more natural configurations. The binding holds, came a voice, not heard with ears but perceived directly through the connection she had established. It was not her mother's voice, nor any specific entity she could name, but rather the collective consciousness of Lothlorien itself, finding expression through her heightened awareness. The black echo sleeps once more, the voice continued, bound not by the power of the three rings but by sacrifice freely given and love enduring beyond the circles of the world. How long will it last? Celebrían asked without speaking, directing her thought into the connection. Long enough, came the enigmatic reply. Until the next turning of the great wheel, when those who remain in Middle-earth must face their own challenges without the direct guidance of the firstborn. Images flowed into Celebrian's mind. Then, visions of what might come in the years and centuries ahead. She saw Lothlorien gradually returning to wild forest, its elven architecture gently reclaimed by nature, yet somehow retaining an ethereal beauty that would inspire awe in those who chanced upon it. She saw her daughter standing beside a crowned Aragorn, their united wisdom helping to usher in a new age of peace and renewal after great darkness. She saw her sons, eventually making their choice to follow the path to Valinor, bringing tales of Middle-earth's transformation to those who had departed earlier. And most surprisingly, she glimpsed something of Valinor itself, not its physical appearance, which remained veiled even to this heightened perception, but the emotional reality that awaited her there. Reunion with Elrond, whose patient love had never wavered during their separation. Reconciliation with her mother, whose difficult choices she now understood more fully after facing her own. Healing of the wounds, both seen and unseen, that had marred her spirit during her time in Middle-earth. "It is time," the voice observed, neither encouraging nor discouraging her departure but simply acknowledging its rightness within the greater pattern. "Yes," Celebrían agreed, feeling a profound peace settle over her. The choice to leave had been made months ago, but this communion confirmed its alignment with the deeper currents flowing through Middle-earth's transition. As she prepared to withdraw from the meditative state, one final image appeared before her inner eye. A small silver seed taking root in fertile soil, putting forth the first delicate shoot of what would one day become a Mallorn tree. Not in Lothlorien, but somewhere distant, overlooking a sea she did not recognize, tended by small hands that had never known the glory of the elven realms yet treasured their memory nonetheless. Legacy, continuance, the eternal cycle of passing and becoming. With this final gift of understanding, Celebrían opened her eyes, returning fully to her physical presence in the glade. The afternoon light had shifted, golden beams now slanting through the trees at a lower angle. She had spent hours in communion without realizing it, yet emerged feeling refreshed rather than drained. Rising to her feet, she placed one hand on the white stone in a gesture of farewell. "Thank you," she said aloud, her voice soft in the stillness of the glade, "for all you have shown me and all you have been to my family across the ages." The stone seemed to warm briefly beneath her palm, a final acknowledgement before she turned to make her way back toward Kara's Galadhin, where preparations for tomorrow's departure ceremony would be nearing completion. The great hall of Kara's Galadhin filled to capacity that evening, as elves from throughout Lothlorien gathered to hear Celebrían's final address. The circular chamber, fashioned within the largest Mallorn in the city, glowed with the light of countless silver lamps, their gentle illumination reflecting off the polished wood of walls that had witnessed thousands of years of elven governance. Arwen sat in the place of honor to her mother's right, with Eladin and Elrohir flanking them. Thalion stood nearby, his position marking the authority that would soon pass fully to him. The council members, those who would remain to assist him in the governance of Lothlorien after Celebrían's departure, occupied a semicircle of seats facing the gathered assembly. Silence fell as Celebrían rose to speak, her silver hair adorned with simple Mallorn blossoms rather than the elaborate circlet she might have worn for formal occasions in earlier times. This moment called for honesty and clarity, not the trappings of a power that was already transitioning from the world. "People of Lothlorien," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hall, "tomorrow I depart for the Grey Havens from which I will sail to Valinor, joining those who have gone before us into the west. Many of you will accompany me on this journey, having chosen to depart Middle-earth while the memory of its glory remains bright in your hearts." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled faces, some determined, some sorrowful, all attentive to words that would help shape their future paths. Others among you have chosen to remain, to oversee the transition of this realm we have loved and protected for so many ages. To you falls perhaps the harder task, witnessing the gradual return of Lothlorien to the natural cycles from which our magic once partially removed it. She gestured toward Thalion. Captain Thalion has agreed to lead those who stay, to maintain what can be maintained for as long as it serves the greater harmony of Middle-earth. I can think of no one better suited to this sacred trust, and I ask that you offer him the same loyalty and support you have shown to me and my mother before me." Thalion bowed deeply, accepting both the honor and the burden of the role being formally conferred upon him. "What we achieved here," Celebrían continued, "in binding the Black Echo once more represents the final gift of the elves to Middle-earth. Not domination or control, but protection freely given, even at great personal cost. It is fitting that our last great work in these lands was not conquest or creation, but preservation and transition, helping to ensure that what follows us can unfold according to its own nature rather than being twisted by ancient malice." She turned slightly, acknowledging her children with a gentle smile. "The future of Middle-earth now passes to new hands, to men primarily, but also to the other free peoples who will share these lands long after the last elven ship has sailed. Our task is to ensure that the wisdom accumulated through our long sojourn here is not lost but transformed, preserved in ways that can guide those who come after without binding them to our choices." From a small table beside her, Celebrían lifted a slender volume bound in silver-gray Mallorn bark, the newly completed Memoirs of Lothlorien, a comprehensive record of the realm's history from its founding through the binding of the Black Echo. "This book contains our story," she explained, "not merely as history but as living wisdom. Copies will remain here in Kara's Galadriel, travel to Rivendell and the Grey Havens, and accompany me to Valinor. In this way, what we have learned, both our triumphs and our mistakes, will endure beyond our physical presence in Middle-earth." She placed the book carefully back on the table, then straightened to deliver the final portion of her address. "Tomorrow, as the sun rises over the Golden Wood, I will begin my journey westward. I do so not in sorrow, but in acceptance of the natural order. The tide that has carried us through Middle-earth now ebbs, calling us back to shores from which we originally departed. Yet even in leaving, we remain connected to this land and its future." Her voice softened, becoming more intimate despite the size of the gathering. "Each of you must make your own choice in your own time, to depart or to remain. Neither path is inherently more right than the other. Both serve the greater harmonies that govern our world. What matters is that you choose with clear eyes and open hearts, understanding what each path offers and what it asks of you." She looked to Arwen, whose choice embodied perhaps the most profound example of this principle. "Some will find their destiny inextricably bound to Middle-earth, their love for this land and its people outweighing even the call of immortality. Others will hear the summons of the sea and know that their healing and fulfillment await in Valinor. Both choices deserve honor and respect." As she concluded her formal address, Celebrían removed a delicate silver circlet from the table, the symbol of governance in Lothlorien since Galadriel's departure. With ceremonial dignity, she placed it upon Thalion's bowed head. "Until the last ship sails," she said, completing the ritual transfer of authority, "may your wisdom guide our people through the autumn of our time in Middle-earth." The assembled elves rose as one, offering a final salute to the daughter of Galadriel, who had led them through this crucial transition. The rustling of their movement sounded remarkably like wind through Mallorn leaves, a fitting music to accompany this moment of profound change. Later, As the formal gathering dissolved into smaller groups sharing memories and making final arrangements, Celebrían found a quiet moment with her 3 children on one of the high flats overlooking the city. "So it begins," Eladin observed, watching the activity below as elves prepared for tomorrow's departures and farewells. "So it continues," Celebrían corrected gently. "What we witness is not a beginning or an ending, but a transition. One thread of a tapestry so vast that we see only fragments of its pattern." "Will you tell father of what we accomplished here?" Rohirrim asked. "Of the binding and what it means for Middle-earth's future." "I will tell him everything," she assured them. "Of your courage in serving as Vilia's anchor, of the sacrifices made to contain the Black Echo, of how the elves who remain continue to honor the legacy he helped establish." She turned to Arwen, whose eyes reflected both resolution and the inevitable sorrow of permanent separation from her mother. "And I will tell him of the choice you have made, my daughter. Not to cause him pain, but because love demands honesty, especially in matters of such consequence." "Thank you," Arwen said softly. "Tell him also that I follow the path he himself taught me to value, one of courage, integrity, and service to a greater purpose than personal desire." "I will," Celebrían promised, embracing her daughter. In that moment, she allowed herself to fully acknowledge the reality that this would be their final parting in the circles of the world, that the daughter who had inherited Galadriel's wisdom and Elrond's compassion would never again walk beside her after tomorrow's farewell. Yet even in this bittersweet recognition, she found a measure of peace. Arwen's choice, though it would eventually lead to mortality, also represented the deepest expression of the elven capacity for love, the willingness to surrender even immortality itself for a union of souls that transcended conventional limitations. "Your path honors us all," Celebrían whispered, holding her daughter close one final time. "And in your children, should you be so blessed, the wisdom of both elves and men will find new expression for the age to come." As night descended upon Lothlorien, the 4 of them remained on the flet, watching stars emerge above the Mallorn canopy. No more words were needed. Their bond transcended language, connecting them across bloodlines and chosen paths, across the divisions of mortality and immortality, across the sea that would soon separate them physically but never in spirit. Eärendil's star shone particularly bright, the mariner's eternal voyage across the heavens, a reminder that some connections endured even the greatest separations. Tomorrow would bring the formal farewells, the beginning of journeys that would carry them to widely divergent destinies. But this moment, this shared silence beneath the stars of a spring night in Lothlorien, would remain with each of them, a memory to sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Dawn broke clear and cool over the golden wood, illuminating the departure procession as it formed at the gates of Kara's Galadhin. Nearly a third of Lothlorien's remaining population had chosen to accompany Celebrían to the Grey Havens, their possessions packed onto wagons or carried in modest bundles on their backs. The rest gathered to bid them farewell, forming an honor guard that would escort them to the borders of the realm. Celebrían, dressed in simple traveling clothes of silver gray, embraced Thalion one final time. "Remember," she said quietly, "your task is not to prevent change but to ensure it occurs with dignity and purpose. When the time comes for the last of our people to depart, leave Lothlorien with honor, not in desperate flight." "I will remember," he promised, the silver circlet gleaming on his brow. "And I will ensure that tales of the Golden would inspire, rather than merely sadden those who come after us." She moved next to her sons, who would accompany her as far as Rivendell before returning to their duties in Middle-earth. "Watch over your sister," she told them, though she knew the instruction was unnecessary. "And when you finally choose your own path, know that either way, you carry my love with you. We will see you again, mother, Eladin assured her. Whether in years or centuries, our paths lead ultimately to Valinor, though much remains for us to do here first. Finally, Celebrían turned to Arwen, whose quiet dignity in this moment of permanent separation revealed the strength that would serve her well in the years ahead. The hardest farewell, Celebrían acknowledged, taking her daughter's hands in her own. And yet not truly goodbye, Arwen replied with gentle wisdom. What we share transcends physical presence. In your memories and mine, in the legacy we both carry forward in different realms, we remain connected. They embraced one last time, neither attempting to hide the tears that came freely now. Around them, similar scenes played out as families and friends separated, some departing for Valinor, others remaining behind to steward what remained of Lothlorien through its final seasons in Middle-earth. May the light of Eärendil guide you, mother, Arwen whispered, pressing something small into Celebrían's palm as they drew apart. And may this remind you of the golden wood when you look upon Valinor's shores. Celebrían opened her hand to find a perfectly preserved Mallorn seed, its silver-gold surface catching the morning light. Such seeds rarely germinated outside the unique conditions of Lothlorien, yet its symbolic value transcended practical considerations, a tangible piece of the realm she had loved, to carry with her into the undying lands. I will treasure it always, she promised, carefully securing the seed in a small pouch she wore around her neck. And perhaps in Valinor it might find suitable soil to grow, bringing a piece of Lothlorien to those shores. The horns of the Galadriel sounded, signaling the time of departure had arrived. With a final look at her daughter, memorizing every detail of her face, the particular quality of light in her eyes, the gentle curve of her smile, Celebrían turned and mounted her white palfrey. At her gesture, the procession began to move, passing through the gates of Caras Galadhen for the last time. The journey to the western borders of Lothlorien proceeded with the dignified grace that had characterized Elven ceremonies since the First Age. Those departing rode or walked in formation, while those remaining accompanied them on either side, singing ancient songs of farewell that had been composed in Valinor before the exile of the Noldor. The music filled the forest, causing birds to fall silent and wild creatures to pause and listen, as if the very land itself participated in this solemn transition. As they approached the edge of the Golden Wood, where the protective influence of Galadriel's ring had once sharply defined the boundary between Lothlorien and the outside world, Celebrían noticed how that border had softened in recent months. The vibrant health and timeless quality of the Mallorn forest now blended more gradually with the ordinary woodlands beyond, wild magic, slowly reclaiming what elven enchantment had temporarily shaped to its will. Here, at this threshold, the final farewells took place. Those returning to Caras Galadhen formed a long line, each offering a personal goodbye to Celebrían. She received them with genuine attention, speaking words of encouragement or remembrance appropriate to each individual, many of whom she had known for thousands of years. When the last farewell had been exchanged, Celebrían turned her horse westward, where the path would lead them toward the misty mountains, then onward to Rivendell and eventually the Grey Havens. Arwen stood directly in her line of sight, framed by Mallorn trees whose new spring leaves captured the morning sunlight, creating a halo of green-gold radiance around her figure. No words remained to be spoken between them. All had been said in their private conversations and in the depth of their final embrace. Instead, Celebrían raised her hand in the traditional elven gesture of blessing and farewell. Arwen returned the gesture, her composure perfect despite the tears that silvered her cheeks. With that exchange complete, Celebrían urged her mount forward, leading the procession out of Lothlorien and into the wider world beyond. She did not look back again, not from fear that her resolve might waver, but from understanding that moving forward required full commitment to the path ahead. The journey that followed took many weeks, first to Rivendell, where a larger group of departing elves joined their company, then westward through Eriador to the Grey Havens on the Gulf of Lune. Throughout the journey, Celebrían found herself noticing details of Middle-earth with heightened awareness. The particular quality of sunlight through oak leaves, the melody of streams cascading over moss-covered stones, the scent of pine forests on cool mountain mornings. These observations were not merely nostalgia but active appreciation, a conscious gathering of memories to carry with her across the sea, ensuring that even in departure, her connection to this land remained intact within her spirit. At Rivendell, she bid farewell to her sons, who would remain there as stewards of Elrond's realm while also maintaining their alliance with the Dunedain. The parting was less absolute than with Arwen. Both Eladin and Elrohir assured her they would eventually sail west, once their responsibilities in Middle-earth reached natural conclusion. "Tell father we remain committed to his vision," Eladin told her as they said goodbye beneath the arches of the last homely house. "Rivendell will continue as a place of learning and healing for as long as its presence serves the greater good. And remind him," Elrohir added with the hint of a smile, "that some journeys take unexpected paths before reaching their destination. Our delay is not reluctance but purpose." She embraced them both, these sons who had inherited their father's wisdom and her mother's determination, finding their own unique expression of these qualities in service to a changing world. "I will watch for your arrival," she promised, "however long it may take." Finally, after many weeks of travel, the company of departing elves reached the Grey Havens, where certain the shipwright awaited them. The ancient haven appeared both busy and emptying, many ships under construction in the harbors, yet many buildings already standing vacant, their former occupants having sailed in earlier departures. Círdan himself greeted Celebrían at the harbor gates, his ageless face bearing the serene expression of one who had witnessed countless arrivals and departures across the millennia, each significant yet part of a greater pattern he alone fully comprehended. "The ship is ready," he informed her simply. "We sail with tomorrow morning's tide." That final evening in Middle-earth, Celebrían walked alone along the shore of the gulf, watching as the setting sun transformed the western waters into pathways of gold and copper. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay Valinor, the undying lands where Galadriel and Elrond now dwelled, where healing and reunion awaited her after long separation. Yet even as she gazed westward with anticipation, she found herself turning occasionally to look back at the eastern horizon, where the first stars now appeared above the distant silhouettes of hills. Somewhere in that direction lay Lothlorien, its golden leaves still falling in the deepening autumn of the Elven age in Middle-earth. Somewhere beneath those same stars, Arwen walked a path that would ultimately separate her from her Elven heritage, embracing a mortal destiny alongside the man who had captured her heart. Not truly separation, Celebrían whispered to herself, understanding flowing through her like the steady pulse of waves against the shore. Transformation. What appeared as endings and partings were, from a higher perspective, simply transitions within a greater continuity. The endless cycle of becoming and changing that governed all existence, even for the seemingly changeless firstborn. The elves might depart from Middle-earth, but their influence would remain, transmuted into songs and stories, into bloodlines and traditions, into the very landscape they had loved and tended for so many ages. Arwen's choice represented this truth in its most potent form, the direct continuation of elven wisdom through new channels, ensuring that what was most essential would endure even as its outer form changed beyond recognition. With this understanding settled deep in her heart, Celebrían removed the pouch containing the Mallorn seed from around her neck. Opening it carefully, she took the seed between her fingers, feeling its perfectly formed contours, the concentration of potential life held within its humble shell. After a moment's contemplation, she knelt and pressed the seed into the fertile soil near the water's edge. Perhaps it would not grow. The conditions here differed greatly from those in Lothlorien. Yet the act of planting it represented her final gift to Middle-earth. Hope, possibility, the faith that beauty might take root in unexpected places long after those who planted it had departed. "Farewell," she whispered, not to the seed but to the land itself, to the complex tapestry of experiences and relationships that had shaped her long life in these mortal realms. "And thank you." Rising to her feet, she turned fully toward the west, where tomorrow's journey would begin with the rising sun. Whatever lay ahead in Valinor, reunion, healing, new forms of growth and service, she would meet it with open heart and clear vision, carrying within her the wisdom gained through both joy and sorrow during her sojourn in Middle-earth. The last light of day faded from the western waters as Celebrían made her way back toward the havens. Behind her, unseen in the gathering darkness, a breeze stirred the soil where she had planted the Mallorn seed, a gentle caress like a promise whispered from the very heart of Ardu itself. Dawn painted the eastern sky with pale gold and rose as the white ship prepared to depart from the gray havens. On its deck, Celebrían stood with the other passengers, elves from Lothlorien, Rivendell, and the havens themselves, all making the final journey across the sundering seas to Valinor. Certain oversaw the preparations with the expertise gained through thousands of years of shipbuilding and navigation, though he would remain in Middle-earth a while longer, seeing that all who wished to depart found passage. His gaze often turned westward with growing longing, a sign that his own departure might not be far distant. "The winds favor us," he told Celebrían as sailors cast off the mooring lines, "and the seas promise calm passage. You should reach the straight road before the next full moon." "Thank you, old friend," she replied, clasping his weathered hand in gratitude. "For this ship, and for your role in binding the Black Echo. Middle-earth will miss your wisdom when you finally sail." He smiled, a rare expression on his normally solemn face. "All things find their proper conclusion in time. My work nears its end, but is not yet complete." He looked past her to the assembled passengers, many of whom gazed back toward the shore with mixed emotions evident in their expressions. "They look to you for guidance during this transition, daughter of Galadriel. The journey across the sea requires navigation of the spirit as much as the body." Celebrían nodded, accepting this final responsibility. As the ship began to move away from the dock, propelled by gentle winds filling its white sails, she moved among her fellow travelers, offering words of comfort and perspective to ease their departure. Some wept openly as the coastline slowly receded, the reality of leaving Middle-earth permanently finally manifesting in physical separation from its shores. Others stood in silent contemplation, millennia of memories playing behind their eyes as they bid farewell to the only home many of them had ever known. For her part, Celebrían found herself filled with a profound serenity as the ship moved steadily westward. The binding of the Black Echo had provided closure to her responsibilities in Middle-earth. Her children had found their paths, Arwen embracing a mortal destiny of profound significance, Eladin and Elrohir continuing their father's work, while forging their own unique contributions to the transition between ages. As the sun climbed higher in the spring sky, the coastline of Middle-earth gradually faded into a thin line on the eastern horizon, then disappeared altogether, leaving only open water in all directions. Yet rather than loss, Celebrían felt expansion, as if her spirit grew larger with each league that passed beneath the ship's keel, encompassing both the lands left behind and the mysterious shores that awaited ahead. In this expansive awareness, distance became meaningless. Lothlorien's golden leaves and Rivendell's cascading waterfalls existed simultaneously with the anticipated white shores of Valinor. Arwen's chosen path and Elrond's patient waiting merged into a single tapestry of love that transcended physical separation. Standing at the ship's prow, Celebrían felt a subtle shift in the quality of light around them as the day progressed. The sun seemed to gain definition, its rays becoming almost tactile in their clarity. The water below transformed from ordinary sea to something more elemental, less a physical substance than the visible manifestation of flowing time itself. "The straight road opens before us," murmured an ancient elf who had joined her at the railing. "We begin to leave the circles of the world." Celebrían nodded, sensing the transition he described. The ship now sailed a course that existed between realms, following a path accessible only to those granted passage to the undying lands. Behind them lay the mortal shores of Middle-earth. Ahead, the blessed realm of Valinor, preserved outside the normal flow of time and change. As twilight approached, stars appeared in the darkening sky, not gradually as they normally would, but all at once, as if a veil had been lifted to reveal their true brilliance. Among them, Eärendil's star shone with particular radiance, guiding their vessel westward just as it had guided elven ships since the elder days. "We follow your father-in-law's light," observed one of the Lothlorien elves, nodding toward the brilliant star. "Yes," Celebrían replied, finding comfort in this connection. "A family reunion of sorts awaits us." As night deepened around the ship, many retired below decks to rest, but Celebrían remained at the prow, watching the star patterns shift in ways she had never observed from Middle-earth's shores. New constellations emerged, arrangements of light that told stories unknown in the lands they had left behind. In this liminal space between worlds, with the gentle rhythm of waves against the hull and the whisper of wind through white sails, Celebrían found herself reflecting on the true meaning of autumn, not merely an ending, but the necessary prelude to renewal, the transition that preserved life's essence while allowing its form to evolve. The last autumn of Lothlorien had not been a tragedy, but a fulfillment, the completion of a cycle begun ages ago when the first elves awakened beneath the stars. They had served as Middle-earth's caretakers and teachers during its formative ages. Now, with that role complete, they departed with dignity, leaving behind both tangible and intangible legacies that would continue to shape the world long after the last elven voice had faded from its forests. In Arwen, in the binding of the Black Echo, in the memories and songs that would persist among men for generations to come, the essence of what elves had brought to Middle-earth would endure, transformed but undiminished, like light refracted through crystal into new and unexpected patterns. As the ship sailed steadily westward along the straight road, Celebrían felt her spirit expanding to embrace both past and future, both departure and arrival, both the autumn of one age and the spring of what awaited beyond the sea. Whatever reunions and healings Valinor held for her, she approached them not as escape from a diminishing world, but as the natural continuation of a journey that had always been leading homeward. The white ship cleaved smoothly through waters that grew increasingly luminous as they sailed farther along the straight road. Ahead, though still beyond physical sight, lay the shores of Valinor, where Elrond waited with patience born of immortal perspective, where Galadriel had found peace after long labors, where healing and renewal would embrace all who had carried the burden of Middle-earth's protection through its darkest hours. Celebrían lifted her face to the stars, feeling the clean wind of transition washing away weariness and sorrow, leaving behind clarity of purpose and openness to what lay ahead. The last autumn of Lothlorien had yielded to winter, as was natural and right. Yet winter itself was not an ending but a pause, a gathering of strength before the inevitable return of spring. In Valinor, that eternal spring awaited, and in Middle-earth, new growth would eventually emerge from what the elves had planted during their long sojourn, different, perhaps, than what had come before, yet carrying forward the essential harmony they had strived to nurture throughout the ages. The ship sailed on through the night, bearing Celebrían and her companions toward shores beyond the circles of the world, leaving behind ripples that would continue to shape the destiny of Middle-earth long after the memory of elves had faded into legend. In this continuity, amid change, in this preservation through transformation, lay the deepest meaning of their journey, and the ultimate legacy of the Golden Wood's last and most beautiful autumn.